This is Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily with Andrew Hustler Paterson and Michael Remis.
What is up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Winnipeg Sports Talk Daily today. Huss and Reem with you. One more sleep to the big game at IG Field tomorrow night. Bombers and Lions for first place in the West. We're going to chop it up with the voice of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers, Derek Taylor, coming up first, and then head out to the West Coast and get the BC perspective on all of this with Farhan Lalji of TSN. Also going to welcome in Scotty Billeck today. And listen, we'll get to a little bit of Jets offseason with Billeck and the big news about the Sea Bears playoff game on Friday, which we'll touch on in a second. And I can't wait to have Aaron Bronsteter on. Big fight coming up for an old favorite of ours and a Winnipeg native in the UFC. And we will tell you all about that coming up over the next couple of hours. We'll also get to the Coolbet lines and the horse picks. And, did we have a night last night at the track with the picks? We'll cover all of that coming up in a few minutes. But, yeah, very packed show. Lots of Bomber talk. We will get to the Jets. We will get to the Sea Bears and Brad Katona moving on to the Ultimate Fighter finale, which we understand is going to be part of the UFC 292 card in Boston, coming up with Aaron Bronsteter. Just before we get Michael Remis in here, we're probably going to have to talk about the Jays getting waxed last night by the Orioles as well. Big thanks to the sponsors that make the show happen. Coolbet Canada, of course, Dusty, myself, Pat Gregoire, banged out our golf episode this week. So if you're looking to put a sprinkle down on the Wyndham Championship, check that out. Lock Shop Bets on YouTube. And, of course, it's up there on our Twitter feeds as well. Our friends at Princess Auto, we're ready for welcoming in Bomber fans to the Princess Auto tailgate zone before tomorrow's game, along with the Gold Eyes, Assiniboia Downs, where I will be tonight, Breezy Bend, Aikens Lake, where I will be on the weekend, Little Brown Jug, Boston Pizza and Royal Sports, Consolidated Supply, Nick and Nicky DQ and F Apparel, Wallace and Wallace, Vita Health Fresh Market, Modern Man, Aquatech, Manitoba Battery, and the Great Taste of Canadian Club, which I know will be well represented on a beautiful summer evening tomorrow for a first place battle in the Western Division with the Bombers and Lions. Let's get right to it and welcome in Michael Remis to the program. Remo, what is going on? God, it's gorgeous outside right now.
Yeah, I'm geared up, Huss. This might be the biggest summer sports week of the year. Can we say that? We got the biggest Bomber game of the season tomorrow night. Bombers Lions, and also the Sea Bears, first ever playoff game. And we got the email today from them opening up the upper deck. Like, who's doing the double header here on the long weekend? This is a big week, Huss. Big week. I know it's summer, August 2nd, but the big Bomber game tomorrow we're all looking for, but also the Sea Bears opening up the upper deck for the first ever playoff game. Like, very exciting.
Yeah, we're going to chop that up with Billeck a little later on. And I see Billeck is in chat. And yes, I kind of forgot that Billeck is a UFC guy, but we'll touch on Brad Katona as well. Listen, just before we get into this, and we will talk about it with Aaron Bronsteter of TSN towards the end of the program. But longtime listeners of the warm-up and the afternoon ride will remember over 5 years ago, Brad Katona was an engineering student at the University of Manitoba training to be a professional MMA artist, and ended up getting cast in The Ultimate Fighter and won. He has had a very wild run through the world of MMA. being released from the UFC, fighting in the Middle East, training in Ireland. And if you caught the fight last night as part of the Ultimate Fighter series, which broadcasts on TSN, Katona was an underdog, as he often is, won an absolute war. And I know that is sort of thrown out for fights all the time. This was the definition of it. Both guys bloodied, won a split decision, and now Winnipeg's Brad Katona can be the first ever fighter to win the Ultimate Fighter twice and to win another UFC contract coming up in Boston. And he was one of my favorite guys to talk to, Remo. He's such an interesting dude. If you saw this dude on the street dressed, you would not in a million years think that he was an MMA fighter. But he is, and he's on the verge of doing something really special. And I'm really looking forward to having Billeck on, and as well, a great conversation with Aaron Bronsteter coming up on one of the underreported stories, I think, around here, but something really, really cool, especially for folks that remember Brad visiting us with us back in the day.
Yeah, very cool. He's still fighting, 31 years old, out of Ireland now on Team Conor McGregor in the Ultimate Fighter from Winnipeg. We had him in studio here. I found the picture. We'll pull it up. We'll bring it on again beforehand, but here's the picture with you and Rick, and there's Brad there. Ignore, if you're, not into cable management, don't look at this. It might hurt your eyes.
God.
Look at all the wires everywhere.
Beautiful old studio on Pembina Highway.
Yeah, there it is. And there's Brad. I had that one on my phone, so we had to pull up. That was December 2018. I remember he came in, so that was pretty cool. So nice to see him on TV yesterday. Back on our radar, Brad Katona.
Yeah, so we're going to get to that a little bit later on, which should be a lot of fun. Well, the other thing we're going to be talking about before we get into the Bombers with Billeck, and this is good news for all of you that have been snoozing on getting to a Sea Bears game. I know everyone wants to go to the playoff game on Friday after a number of sellouts. I didn't think that this was possible, and I think everyone knows I was as bullish on this product and this season for basketball, pro basketball back in Winnipeg than maybe anybody. I didn't think they were ever going to get to the upper bowl. The upper bowl is open for the playoff game on Friday night, and they're not doing that unless there's a demand for it, Reem. So it is very clear that people have been jumping all over these tickets for the final Sea Bears game. A rematch of last Saturday's unfortunate loss to Edmonton, although it probably works out better for a lot of folks that the game's on Friday of the long weekend as opposed to the Sunday of the long weekend. So maybe that'll help put a few more asses in the seats. Bottom line is, get ready for another record-breaking crowd in the CEBL from the Winnipeg Sea Bears. And I mean, this story of the team and our city embracing basketball just continues to get better. And as I say, no excuses now. Tickets are available. Get in there. Hell, get 300 level tickets. Be one of the first people ever to sit in the upper bowl at Canada Life Center for CEBL basketball. But is the lower bowl all sold out now?
Yeah. So we pulled up the Ticketmaster map yesterday. And these sections like 111, 112, 113, and then 211, 212, 230, like these ones here at the south end zone, they were all available. They're all gone.
I think they just opened it up. That is wild.
There's a bunch of singles. They're only singles here. Look, only singles, and they were I forget, the cheapest ticket in the lower bowl was $25. They've opened up the upper deck. The cheapest ticket now, $21.75. So look at the lower bowl house. It's all sold out. There's a couple. They're all singles. A couple here and there. Then go to the upper deck. They've opened these 4 sections here at the top. Let me just give you the numbers. You can get a nice. Ever want to sit in a loge seat? How much is a loge? $73.25. Sounds comfortable. Feels like you're in the press box
Those
up
are
there.
the best. How much are the loge seats are 73?
Yeah, and then a regular ticket is $21.75. So, yeah, and then I guess lower row. The cheapest is $21.75. Others are $25.75. Closer to the front. But great value, great evening. I was like, okay, they got yesterday when we showed the map, I was like, yeah, okay, they got a couple days to sell these, that's fine. And less than 24 hours, they're all gone. And they opened up more this morning. I was pretty shocked. So we'll see how these go. I guess they can
I think
open
it was
up.
Probably the messaging from Winnipeg Sports Talk.
Yeah.
The very clear message to you all to get your tickets now before it fills, and people jumped on it.
Yeah.
I joke because there's been so much momentum for this team throughout the year. But
yeah, the merch line.
I wouldn't be surprised if they get into a few more sections as well, to be honest with you.
It's certainly possible. They sent out the email. I mean, we're talking about it here. A lot of people talk about Sea Bears. I mean, it's playoffs, exciting. So people are buying them. I'm curious if these will sell, and then we'll get an email maybe tomorrow morning. Oh, we've actually opened up more and more. So the hype around this team for basketball back in Winnipeg, very exciting. And I think people are checking out who aren't basketball fans, or maybe they are basketball fans and are excited. But if you're checking it out and maybe you don't love basketball, but you love the atmosphere, the fan interaction, the game production, everything. There's so much to like about it, and I'm looking forward to being there. 8 o'clock start, Huss. 8 o'clock tip-off Friday on a long weekend.
And you know what? And listen, that's awesome because, and this is one thing I haven't done as much, but I pop by. I'm kind of going to myself or meeting, Billeck and whatever the guys down in the media row. But 2 hours before the game, much like we do at IG Field with the Princess Auto Tailgate Zone, they have put on a great show in True North Square. So if you're going to the game on Friday, make a point of getting down there early. I know there's food, there's drink. Obviously, you can go into the market, bunch of other places, the Boston Pizza, of course, where we love to hang, and actually where I watch the UFC after the Sea Bears game on Saturday night, right down the street. But pop in if you can into the area of True North Square. There's a whole bunch of stuff going on. And, it's going to be cool. A Cardinal official playing at halftime. I'm just looking at the chat right now. Dunk Dynasty has his tickets for Friday. And Reimer's happy to hear they're getting that support. And Jets fans saying we're going to break our own record. Jeff Kabila saying Gregory Liverpool is upset that they didn't open the upper bowl for the last game. Yes, I know. You can check my DMs. There's plenty of takes from Greg on it all. The bottom line is that these next couple days are going to be real fun for fans going to games. And I should mention, we'll do this later on, but sometimes people hear different parts of the show. If you go to Coolbet, I've got a special Winnipeg Sports Talk exclusive. Bombers to win Thursday, Sea Bears to win on Friday. And they gave us a nice little number at plus 185 on that. I think if you just put them in separately, it's around plus 160 or 165. So would be very happy to cash that one. And means it'd be a lot of happy Winnipeggers and Manitobans going home from IG Field and from the stadium from the arena, Canada Life Center, coming up on Friday night. So, by the way, if you missed yesterday's program and you're a Sea Bears fan, check it out. Really great chat with Jelani Watson-Gale, who quickly became my favorite player just from watching the way he plays. A smaller guy, energy dude coming in off the bench and has lit up teams. I believe he's been the leading scorer a game or two. Although what Teddy Buckets is doing, putting up 30-plus in most games, that is tough to do, especially coming off the bench. But it was a real fun conversation. He talked about how much they and the team have absolutely enjoyed every second of this Winnipeg summer and being Sea Bears. And let's send them off to Calgary for Sunday night's game with some seriously big support and what should be another historic game. This could technically, Remo, push the all-time pro basketball. Well, I know you mentioned, and I don't know what the numbers were on those NBA exhibition games. I'm not sure whether they sold out or what the numbers were. But as an old head from the Thunder days, I can remember the opening game of the Thunder at Winnipeg Arena was, I believe, over 11,000. I think they regularly got in the 7,000 to 8,000 for the first part of that season. And then unfortunately the league, which was, a disaster in most of the other markets, we started losing teams and it started losing momentum. But again, we've talked a lot about all the CEBL records that the Sea Bears have been smashing and continue to do. This game on the weekend potentially could rival the biggest Thunder game of all time, and we're talking about going all the way back into the 90s for that.
Yeah, and I see people asking, is the Sea Bears, first of all, the attendance that the Sea Bears are doing, I mean, it's miles ahead of everyone else in the league. Like the league attendance top 5 records are all Sea Bears.
No one else plays in buildings like Winnipeg does. And I mean, that was the genius of David Asper's plan, was making this happen and having it be at the downtown arena. A perfect time to do it. Obviously, they've worked out with Kevin Donnelly and everyone there at True North Sports and Entertainment to make it happen. And it has been the perfect storm. And I do know, I was on in, where was it, Calgary the other day?
Yeah.
And they were kind of asking me about this, and I said, look, with the changing demographics of Canada, with the popularity of basketball, and we're going to get a chance to talk more hoops coming up this month as Canada's going to the World Cup, and with our best team ever. Basketball is just in a way different place in this country than it was even 10 years ago, never mind 20 or 25. So I think there's huge potential for this league to see Edmonton play in a bigger venue, potentially Calgary. Hopefully, the Saskatchewan team hasn't had the support that you might have expected, and they've been around for a while. But listen, everything's coming up Sea Bears right now and CEBL, and in just one quick year, they are the model franchise, frankly, in the Canadian Elite Basketball League. And we just hope that they can win on Friday night and keep this magical first season going to Calgary, and then, of course, to the championship tournament in Vancouver.
Yeah, people asking in chat, if you can watch it on TV, maybe you're out of town and can't make it. Like, it is on TSN Plus. They have all the games. It's a nice synergy there that CBL has with TSN. You've had a couple national games. Chuck Swirsky was here calling the Sea Bears on their national game, but on TSN Plus, so I use Fire Stick. I get the TSN app. I log in with my cable provider, and you can get there's some good stuff on there, TSN Plus. Sometimes I turn it on because I got multiple TVs, and I'm like, yeah, what's on? And I was watching like NWSL soccer, or they had like XFL like late games on. So
okay, let me ask you this, not to stomp for our old employer, but how the hell do you get TSN Plus? People ask me. Most people have no clue. What do you do?
Okay, I'll show you. Here, we'll do it right now.
This is a PSA for TSN, because our guy Aaron Bronsteter is coming on.
Well, we have
a little later on.
Yeah, we have Farhan and Aaron.
And Farhan too, of course.
This is what. So, if you want to do it, you get the app. So I do it on Fire Stick, and you log in. But we can try it on the computer, which is here. TSN Plus. I'm clicking stream now, and it's going to ask you to log in. Do you want to log in with your cable? So if you subscribe to TSN on cable, you already get TSN Plus. So I hit sign in, and it's going to be like access. So you can either subscribe to them directly, which a lot of people are doing, or if you have it on your TV already, click I'm a TV subscriber, and then you go find your cable provider. So here in Winnipeg, you're either on Bell MTS or you're on Shaw, and then you click on that one. And you have to know your login credentials when you go check your bill on that site. A lot of people don't know that, so I would recommend finding that information for your Bell or Shaw login. Then you can get TSN Plus on on the app, whatever wherever you use. I use Fire Stick. There's other ones, or on web too. So that's our how to get TSN Plus with your cable provider.
I still don't even know what Fire Stick is.
It's the Amazon streaming thing.
Interesting. Well,
it plugs into your TV.
We'll do another August tech segment with Michael Remis.
Sure.
But there you go. That's how you figure out TSN Plus and get it if you need it. And there is a ton of great content on there that you wouldn't normally get on the television. As you mentioned, speaking of TSN, Farhan coming up as well from the West Coast, which should be some fun. Just quickly, I know DT's going to jump on right away, Remo. Ugly night for the Jays last night. Kind of coming in close. One of the pitchers they got from St. Louis came in, gave up 3. It went from 4-3 to 7-3, and then the roof sort of caved in. And Man, this Orioles team is a handful, but I mean, you just wonder where the Jays would be if they had even an average record against the AL East this season.
I was just going to say that. You look at the Jays' record against the AL East. Are you ready for this, Hustler? Now, the Jays on the year, pretty good. 59-49, 5.46 winning percentage. That's a pretty good record. Versus the AL East, 7 wins, 22 losses. Okay, well, let me do
games below 500 in the division.
Okay, let me do some quick math. 7 divided by 29 total games. That's a 2-4-1 win percentage against their own division. You're not going to get anywhere with that record because obviously your divisional game is so important. But that is, I mean, even if you had 500 against your own division, they would be in such a better spot. So it's crazy to think against their own division, so poor. But Baltimore, I don't know, are they running away with it here? They're now 1.5 games up on Tampa, 66-41. They're a good baseball team, but this Toronto record or the East. I mean, if only they lived, or only Toronto was located in a different part of the country. Because I remember the Blue Jays teams like 1998. You know, I remember they had Clemens and Pat Henkin. They had a really good team. Carlos Delgado, Shannon Stewart's in there. I've been using him in Immaculate Grade quite a bit actually. But they were always go up against the Yankees, and this is just every team in their division is over 500, and the Blue Jays not able to have a 500 record against the teams in their division. It's crazy.
So the Blue Jays outside of the division are 57 and what did you say? It was 7 and
7.
22?
So it'll be 52.
52 and 27.
Yeah, that's crazy.
25 games above 500 against everybody else and can't win in their own division. Yikes. Good thing, though. You know who's back on the hill tonight. And I told you this before the season. You say Kikuchi. It is Kikuchi time tonight, and the Jays need it big time after dropping the first 2 of this series. All right, we're going to talk Bombers in just a minute. Looking forward to having the voice of the blue and gold, Derek Taylor, jump on with us. Just before we do that, our friends at Aquatech have a massive sale going on right now this week. The in-store summer staycation sale with everything in stock, 10% off. Of course, Aquatech, pools and spas. You can make 23 the year you take the plunge, and their team can provide on-the-spot pricing from designers as well as financing options. Of course, you can find all that out at aqua-tech.ca, as well as what they can do with home renovations, and thousands of renos is their foundation. But this is the perfect time to get down to Aquatech with the summer staycation sale. Everything in the store, 10% off. Book it. Get on down to Aquatech today. And again, the website is aqua-tech.ca. Folks, if you need a cut in time for the long weekend, time to get down to Modern Man Barber Shop with 8 locations in Winnipeg, including the newest locations on either Pembina Highway or Plessy Road. Modern Man has you covered, fellas, with a variety of grooming services, haircuts, beard shaping, shaves, color services, and more, all with an incredible staff of licensed barbers at all 8 locations. Book your look and make an appointment at modernmanbarber.com and give them a follow on Instagram at Modern Man Barber Shops. Well, it's just about long weekend time again, and I ask you, do you have all the batteries you need for the summer fun you and your family are really getting into on the weekend? If you don't, or you're not sure, you should probably check in with Donnie and the gang down at Manitoba Battery at 1026 Logan Avenue. Listen, they've got the best prices in town. Do not waste your time at Canadian Tire or in the Costco parking lot when you can shop local and save big money with Manitoba Battery. And I'll tell you what, if you have a tough time getting down there, no worries on that, because they'll deliver it for you free of charge anywhere in the city of Winnipeg inside the perimeter for any order over $60. You need something for the boat, the camper, the lawn tractor, a Sea-Doo or a boat. They've got it all. Go to manitobabattery.com order, free delivery in the city of Winnipeg. Save money and, most importantly, save time these precious summer moments with you and your family. ManitobaBattery.com, and again, 1026 Logan Avenue. And just before we bring in DT, Thursday night game, 30 degrees, midsummer. It calls for hopefully a Bomber win and a bunch of CC and Gingers at the game tomorrow. Of course, you know Canada's favorite whiskey Canadian club is the official spirit of the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And whether you're at the Rum Hut enjoying a CC and Coke or grabbing the drink of the summer, the Canadian Club and Ginger Ale in cans, Canadian Club is behind the Bombers and is there for you. And you will see plenty of it at IG Field tomorrow night. I'm hoping for a well-lubricated crowd because I think the Bombers are going to need it because they got a heck of an opponent coming in, especially considering what we saw when these two teams met earlier this season. And to get us ready for the big game, a man you can pop by and see at the Princess Auto Tailgate Zone doing the pregame show on OB before tomorrow night's tilt beginning at 5:30. The one and only Derek Taylor. DT, what is going on? How are you?
Can I tell you a special story from inside the Princess Auto Tailgate Zone?
Yes, please do.
Consecutive home games. We're there every home game. Myself, Doug Brown, Ed Tate, Ted Wyman, the gang. Consecutive home games. Someone has mistaken me for Doug Brown, and I love it. A lady came up and said, "What's your name?" Because my husband says you're Clay Young, but I say, no, that's Doug Brown. And the Hall of Famer, 6'8" Doug Brown, sitting, across the table to my left, just kind of shrinks down into himself and goes, "I can't believe it. I can't believe I'm being compared to this guy." But it made me very proud. So Waiter also thought we were brothers. So I'm like, this is going great for me. Everything is happening for DT.
I'm so glad that you brought this up. WS Tears, I'm putting a plea and a challenge to you. When you get there tomorrow for the game and the guys are doing it on a break, pop by, say hi, and please make it look like you're convinced that Derek Taylor is Doug Brown. Tell him that he was your favorite player during that great career, and then ask Doug or Derek to introduce you to his partner.
Yes. Oh, I pray that happens. Because if you can see Doug's soul just shrink when it happens, it's incredible to watch. But no, Doug's a great sport. There was a moment in the last home game where there was a kid wearing a 97 jersey and it says Brown on the back, and he didn't realize that the guy from his jersey was sitting 3 feet away from him. So when his dad said, "Oh, he'll sign it for you," Doug started signing his back. The kid was just beaming at getting to be that close to a CFL legend. So it's a ton of reasons why you should come down to the tailgate party zone.
Get that WS Tears. I'm serious. I want to hear Derek text me after the game going, "You're not going to believe this." It was nonstop. People just coming up asking Derek for his autograph as Doug Brown. That is what we need to have happen. And
what was it like playing alongside Joe Fleming? Well, let me tell you.
Man, what a tilt we've got tomorrow night. Listen, I think like most of Bomber fans, and listen, I think even the media, although, there is a daily grind to covering the team. I've had this game and this date circled on my calendar since I walked out of the stadium after the Lions handed the Bombers their lunch earlier this season. I know the Bombers, with their workmanlike attitude led by Mike O'Shea, are saying, "Hey, this is week 8 or whatever of the season, game number 8. We got a job to do. It's just a game." I don't think it's just another game. I think this is the biggest test of the season. And I think this is one of these teams is going to make a very, very big statement. Either the Bombers that, listen, we had a bad night earlier, but we are still the team to beat in this division, especially at home. And for a British Columbia Lions team that has been defensively incredible all season long, can come in and say that was no fluke, and there's a new team on the block, a new team to beat in the West. This is one of the games of the year, even though we're still in the first half of the season, Derek.
Well, and it feels crazy to say, but this game could determine first place in the West, right?
No doubt.
Let's spell that out. If the Lions come to Winnipeg and win, they win the season series. and they're 2 wins up on the Bombers. So the Bombers, down the stretch, their final 10 games, would have to win 3 more games than the BC Lions do. And when you look at the BC Lions, you go, I don't know if that's possible. Like, Huss, one of you or I could quarterback it, and the defense will keep teams to under 12 points, and we'll win it because the rest of the gang will carry us, right? Like, BC is, at this moment, at a 2021 Winnipeg Blue Bombers level of defensive play. Under 12 offensive points against per game and under 5 yards per play against per game. Those numbers are ridiculous.
What are the numbers, DT? What are the numbers if you take out the 45 they gave up when VA threw half a dozen picks to the Argos? It's probably like 4 or 5 points a game.
Yeah, it's amazing. And maybe the most important number for Thursday's game is 6, right? It was 6 points. The Bombers had put up 40 burgers in back-to-back games. They got 2 field goals off this BC Lions team. It's impressive. So a ton of love to both their coordinators, Ryan Phillips and Jordan McSimic, for what they've been able to do this season. They lose their first quarterback. They have to go to Dane Evans. They've bounced around their running backs. For that first game, they didn't have Dominic Rhymes and Keon Hatcher. For me, their 2 best receivers. Those guys are back now. They've gone through maybe not as many injury problems as some other teams, but definitely lost impactful players, and they're rolling. So if the Bombers don't win this game, they're not going to finish in first place. And as much as Mike O'Shea will say, well, you can win it a bunch of ways, ... We won the 2019 Grey Cup going on the road twice. Sure, but as I will keep saying, since 2000, more than 60% of the teams that have been to the Grey Cup were the number 1 seed in their division for exactly the reason we think. Home game, and you only play 1 playoff game to get to the Grey Cup. So this game is enormous.
Well, it is. And I mean, obviously, mathematically, I mean, they'd be 2 games back. They'd have lost the season series. So you're basically 3 games back. Lots can change in the second half of the season. But when it all comes down to it, I mean, I got a ton of respect for this BC team. I think I don't think there's any doubt we are all expecting it's going to be BC Winnipeg to play in Hamilton in that Grey Cup. But I'll tell you what, I would way rather have the BC Lions come out of the Dome and come down to Winnipeg, as Willie Jefferson likes to say, in -15 in November, as opposed to playing in the Dome, albeit the Bombers have had success in the Dome over the last few years. You know what I mean? Winnipeg in November is a hell of a lot different than even Winnipeg at this point or earlier in the season. But you have to earn that opportunity to host that game. And tomorrow night will be massive when it comes to determining who that team on the top of the West is at the end of the regular season.
Oh, for sure. And pretend there is a scenario in which the Bombers finish second and host the West semifinal. They're going to be a 9-point favorite, 10-point favorite over Sask or over, pretend there's
Ottawa.
a crossover. Yeah, pretend there's a crossover. They're going to be a 9-10-point favorite, but is any Bomber fan going to be fully comfortable with what happened against Ottawa earlier this season, how tough Montreal played them last season, including breaking their win streak in Week 10 at home, and in any game against Sask? Because what if Trevor Harris is back by then? Trevor Harris looked, I mean, it was 45-27, whatever, but Trevor Harris in that offense looked really good in that game. So there's a high probability you win that game, but there's a 25% chance you don't win that game and don't get to go to Vancouver for a West final. So just more and more why, oh boy, the Bombers need to have it all together for Thursday night.
Hey, just as a quick aside, and I was chopping this up with Dusty, who will be in to call the game on TSN tomorrow night in the lock shop. And you know, I was sort of having a little fun with the Elks, and, you know, obviously they're such a mess right now. But then we got talking about Calgary's situation, and then we started talking about where Saskatchewan is right now, and kind of looked, and the Elks have, I think it's Ottawa and Hamilton coming up after the Winnipeg game. And we started saying, what kind of a number could we get on the Elks to make the playoffs? Never mind win a game.
Oh, man.
Let's turn this around. Like,
what if Jared Diggy's for real, hey? Yeah.
Were you as down? What did you think of Edmonton coming into this season? And what do you make of just the absolute, well, you'd assume they bottomed out, but maybe not. I guess it can always get worse.
Yeah, honestly, I was fairly high on Edmonton coming into the season just because of how things went for Chris Jones when he went to Sask, right? 16, it was awful. They won 5 games, whatever it was, but they laid some foundational pieces. So last season, as they were running bodies in and out, okay, yeah, they'll set it. They'll find a couple of guys and they'll be set, I thought, for 2023. Since they committed to Taylor Cornelius, I've long been on record saying I would have just yeeted Cornelius out the door a long time ago, just because I didn't think he was viable as a starting quarterback. But I kind of convinced myself, well, if you are committing to Cornelius, as you've done by guaranteeing him money for 2024, the best you can do is surround him with amazing talent. And nobody was able to really revamp their offensive line, so they went and got big-time receivers. Geno Lewis, unfortunately, on the 6th game. Stephen Dunbar, to a lesser extent, Kyron Moore. You went, okay, they're giving him the weapons to work with. They add that to Dylan Mitchell, who really popped last season. But I thought it would work despite the quarterback, and as it turns out, no, Cornelius hasn't. He's been exactly what I always thought he was, and they probably could have bought an offensive lineman or two, because how quickly BC was gooning them in that game this past week was ridiculous, and no quarterback could have survived in that. So yeah, I'm fairly surprised. I thought third, maybe they push for second, but they're hoping they can change things with Jarius Jackson at OC and squeak into a playoff spot with 10 games left to go. But I don't know.
Well, you know what? And listen, Riders, Stamps are both in real trouble right now. I mean, it's very clear. It's the Bombers and the Lions and everybody else in the Western Division, which brings us back to tomorrow. Correct me if I'm wrong. Jackson Jeffcoat was out the first time these two teams played, correct?
Correct, yeah.
So his return to the lineup, and he makes such a difference, not just in his own spot, but for the others around him, especially Willie Jefferson. How will this Bomber team look different than it did in the earlier matchup between these two teams?
Well, the defense there, the defensive front six is the place, right? Because Jeffcoat, as much as Celestin Haba did some nice things, Jackson Jeffcoat produces quarterback pressure better than any player in the Canadian Football League, right? And then, oh, by the way, opposite side is Willie Jefferson, and Willie's having an amazing season already, right? So now those two guys are working together with Ricky Walker and Jake Thomas, and then you add in the return of Kyrie Wilson. I'm very curious to see how that works. We can talk about that in a second. But Jackson Jeffcoat being back, Dane Evans, the history of Dane Evans against the Bombers, I think we can all look back as Bomber fans in our mind's eye and go, oh, yeah, when he's under pressure, that first game last season in Winnipeg, he looked like he thought he was going to die, right? And just whip the ball out. Dunbar's not there, boom, I'm just whipping the ball out of bounds, right? The Grey Cups, pressure in his face, so he threw his interception on his first pass attempt. Oh, yeah, there you go. That's how it should look, and that's what wasn't there in the visit to Hamilton last year. Jeffcoat got hurt in that game, right? So Dane was phenomenal, and the offense was amazing in that game, and I'm not even sure Jeffcoat makes that big a difference. But if you get pressure on Dane, this is a joke I made to a buddy last week watching the game 2 weeks ago. I said, I want to find something in life I love as much as Dane Evans loves patting the football in the pocket. And my buddy said to me, well, what about Slurpees? I'm like, okay, yes, I love Slurpees as much as Dane Evans loves patting the football. But just watching him, you go, you're a little late on that throw because you took two extra pats, and now you forced Whitehead into a bad spot. To me, that stuff still exists. It looked great last week against the winless Elks, but you will not have time to pat the ball on Thursday with Jeffcoat and Jefferson coming after you.
Well, to me, the biggest challenge for the Blue Bombers, I'm sure you'd agree, is protecting Zach Collaros and reestablishing themselves as the Winnipeg Blue Bombers on the line of scrimmage and the offensive line. Talk to us about the challenge that this offensive line is going to be facing and what is on their shoulders, considering that was where it fell apart earlier, in the year. And Zach, to his credit, didn't point fingers. I mean, he just kept getting up. But the bottom line was that there was a reason why he kept on getting up. He was getting sacked or was getting knocked around every second time he took a snap.
Yeah, we were looking back at it in the post-game show on CJOB that day, and Doug Brown had said, has Zach ever been sacked that much? The most times he'd ever been sacked as a Bomber was 5. Never 6. That game was 7. And there was Matthew Betts blowing kisses to the crowd after his third sack of the game, right? And it was really unexpected to hear Doug's voice of the broadcast and go, Stanley Bryant gets beat by a speed rush to the inside. And just to hear the kind of disbelief in his voice, we had no idea what to make of it at the end of it, right? Because Bryant got beat in that game. Hardrick got in that game. It felt more so the edges than the interior in that game, but I don't think anybody came out of that game looking particularly good. And BC, like, my goodness, we didn't really notice necessarily Woody Barron in that game on the interior. That guy's a monster. That guy's an absolute monster. But here's Betts with all the skill in the world, all the athletic talent in the world, the motor on that guy as he's trying to chase down Cornelius last week. You go, this guy's unbelievable, and it all works together. Oh, by the way, here's David Menard as well, and this guy's gonna wreck your life. And Tehema can do some stuff in there as well. You go, this defensive front is fantastic. And then, oh, by the way, the back six is, I haven't checked, probably the most veteran back six in the Canadian Football League. They can cover the heck out of you too. Man, if they don't figure out how to contain Matthew Betts, though, if I see him blowing kisses on Thursday to the crowd, I'm going to cry. I'm going to celebrate a little bit because a Canadian can wreck it from the defensive end spot, and it's a guy that Chris Jones, I feel like, just said go away because you're Canadian. I may be making that up, who knows? But he's absolutely wrecking it, and it's great for the league to see a Canadian guy doing so well. I would love him to be held down on Thursday, however.
Yeah, well, I'll say this, DT. Betts can do his thing, just not in our house tomorrow night against the Winnipeg Blue Bombers.
Exactly.
And I imagine that, listen, as I said, I know that, Ocean and the guys are, taking their usual workmanlike approach to this game. But I mean, we talked to Rashid yesterday. We had Brady on a couple weeks ago. This game is still very much in the mind of everyone. I imagine especially the big boys up front that have been the foundation of the success of this team throughout this championship era. And I think that is going to be, that's where I'm going to be looking first. Any other sort of intangibles or things that maybe people aren't talking about this game that you think could be impactful and we should pay attention to when things kick off tomorrow night?
Yeah, the biggest one is the return of Kyrie Wilson. He did his Achilles in week 4 last season in Edmonton and hasn't played since then. So this will be his first game back. And when you hear the players and when you hear Coach O'Shea talk about Kyrie Wilson, like, oh, he's big and he's smart and he's fast and he crushes screens, like he's an incredible linebacker. Essentially what you take away is Kyrie's incredible and we're beyond overjoyed to have him back in the lineup. So one, having him back, when I look back at, say, big run plays, I feel like Kyrie Wilson can be a guy who changes that. A big run play to Dedrick Mills in the first carry of the game in Calgary is just, it feels like it's just one guy out of his gap. So if Kyrie's there and Kyrie's in his right gap, okay, that's solved. But the other part of that then for me becomes, okay, Kyrie can do a bunch of stuff and Kyrie is excellent. So now what does that allow Richie Hall to do with Adam Bighill? Because Bighill, we've seen it, right? Bighill can cover, and Bighill is very effective as a blitzer as well. So if Kyrie can do this, what other things can we do with Adam Bighill? What other things can we do with Brandon Alexander if we decide to start shifting bodies around, right? These guys who are, because they're working with a teammate who is more skilled and gets it, what will that allow the other incredibly skilled players to do, right, in the middle of that defense? So I'll be curious to see what ends up happening with Biggie because, yeah, he can do a lot of stuff. He popped Stephen Dunbar, a real good one last year. They went, oh, yeah, Big Hill's in coverage too. Oh, yeah, by the way, he had, 5 sacks in 2021 because they let him get after it. Oh, he's squeezing in the A gap and wrecking quarterbacks. All right, let's see what Biggie can do. A couple sacks in the game earlier this year. I usually don't focus on linebackers, but I'm very curious to see the effect of Kyrie Wilson's return.
Derek, this has been a lot of fun. Or Doug, should I call you that? Folks, special bonus to any WST listener that can come down again. Do this during a break because the guys do have a show to do. But hand the real Doug Brown your camera and ask him, would you mind, sir, if you could take a picture with me and Doug Brown? That is what you send that to me. We'll have something special for you coming up when you provide that. It's going to be fun. Hopefully you'll have some fun with some of these antics beforehand, but the fun's really starting, of course, about 5:30 with the broadcast. And listen, by the way, I not to shit all over the CFL because we all love it. We want it to work, but well done to you guys. I was driving home last game, listening to you guys do the post-game show with no stats, and I can't imagine the challenge and the frustration that you and the other broadcasters are going on right now. That has to get fixed. We won't dump all over it, but I mean, it is insane that we are where we are right now, and it's not running smoothly, but well done. It's certainly still entertaining, but I know it's frustrating to you guys not to have a little bit more at your hands when you're talking about the game that was just played.
Yeah, the commissioner said it'd be done in July. He didn't say which July, but he said it'd be back in July. So I don't know.
First game in August tomorrow. We'll see about that.
Exactly.
Hey, buddy, have a great call tomorrow. Thanks for doing this.
Thanks, brother.
Good stuff. There is Derek Taylor or Doug Brown, if you see him tomorrow at the game. Princess Auto Tailgate Zone. They get going at 5:30. Pop by and say hi. We do have a little bit of breaking Jets news. Rasmus Campari has signed with the club. He, of course, coming over as part of the package for Pierre-Luc Dubois, former first rounder. He 2-year contract at $1 million AAV. We've got a nice little scouting report on Campari from Daryl Evans, who I hooked up with at the draft. So we'll have that for you a little later on. Billeck's going to join us. We'll talk about that as well. But first up, we've got Farhan Lalji. Before we bring in Farhan, though, hey, folks, long weekend coming up. It's time to get ready for stocking up on everything you want for your weekend plans. And I'm sure it probably involves barbecuing, which is another reason to get on down to Vita Health. Vita Health Fresh Market with 6 locations. There's great prices on natural and organic supplements, beauty products, but also groceries and Winnipeg's largest assortment of local products too. And I mentioned the grill. How about those amazing Vita Market grass-fed bison and beef steaks for a little August-long barbecue? And hey, they do have delicious grab-and-go lunches that are delivered twice a week. Their sandwiches and wraps come with a free sapsucker drink this month as well. So if you do want to pick a few things that are just ready to grab and go for your travels, Vita Health is that spot as well. Vita Health Fresh Market, empowering people to lead healthy lives. 6 Winnipeg locations and a fully shoppable website online with local delivery options at myvita.ca. Hey, Winnipeg is, of course, hosting the World Police and Fire Games right now. And listen, we know Wallace & Wallace has been a great supporter of us here in Winnipeg's, the fencing and overhead door specialist since 1946. So it should come as no surprise that Wallace & Wallace are proud sponsors of the World Police and Fire Games and are the official supplier of all the fencing that is on their various sites. If you're having an outdoor event, a wedding, a family reunion, or business-wise need a temporary fence of any kind for your property or a construction site, give Wallace & Wallace a call, 452-2700. They can hook you up with that. Of course, they can also come and give you a free estimate on fencing needs for your property. And, of course, the best selection of overhead garage doors in town as well. See them online at wallacefences.com or pop down to their showroom on Lawson Road off at Kenniston. Guys, I know we'll be wearing flip-flops and shorts and T-shirts or suns out, guns out on the weekend. But listen, fall's coming up. Many of you will be getting back to business as normal. And many of you are going to want to be looking good for the change of seasons. If you need to upgrade that wardrobe, only one place to be. You go down and see Andrew, Alex, and their great team at F Apparel at 190 Smith Street downtown. Custom suits, just the way you like them, beginning at $400, along with chinos, golf pants, custom shirts, both tucked and untucked styles, and an incredible selection of menswear accessories. They do have a 15% discount for wedding parties, so if you're planning the big day in advance, don't waste money renting tuxes and taking them back. Get suits that are going to look great for the big day and the future at F Apparel. They can get working on that when you pop by and see them, or find out more, make an appointment online at that's EPHapparel.com. Got to give a shout out to our friends Nick and Nikki DQ. Of course, lots of DQ ice cream cakes, very popular right now. Remo had a Hot Wheels one for Evan's birthday on the weekend. And if you figured that ice cream, or may I suggest the Blizzard cakes, absolutely all world, would make your event better, you hit them up on Instagram at DQ Manitoba. Fire a picture over, let them know what you're looking for, and they'll get it done up as only Nick and Nikki can for a quick and easy pickup at any of the 4 Nick and Nikki DQs. And while you're there, you can maybe sample one of those new summer Blizzard flavors if you haven't already. Nick and Nikki are at 4 locations: DQ Northgate, DQ Polo Park, DQ St. Anne's, and DQ Niverville. All right, Scott Billeck coming up in about 15 minutes. We will talk about the Campari signing, and I'm looking forward to hearing what Scott has to say about Brad Katona's big win last night. Aaron Bronsteter later on. My red-hot ASD picks as well before the end of the show. But let's stay on Bombers-Lions right now. Had a great chat with Derek Taylor. Now let's head out to the West Coast and hook up with Farhan Lalji of TSN for the latest from the Lions side of things. Farhan, how you doing? How's the summer going, my friend?
Oh, it's good. Spent some time in the Okanagan, spent some time on the road at NFL training camps. And, you know, it's funny for me, summer just accelerates by, right? Kind of living in that football cycle, but enjoying every minute of it.
Well, you know, I do want to ask you a couple of things about NFL camps, but we got to start off with this big tilt between the Bombers and the British Columbia Lions. I can tell you here in Winnipeg, the fans, and I'm sure the Bombers have been looking forward to this game ever since BC came in and frankly whooped Winnipeg 30-6 earlier this season. BC, for their
I'm
part,
sure it's a big deal.
And it should be. Like, Farhan, the Bombers hadn't lost to a Western Division team since 2018, and they didn't just lose that game. They got it handed to them. And we've been fascinated, waiting to see how these teams would match up a second time. But I'll say this, I mean, just watching the BC Lions doing what they've been doing week in and week out, this team is an absolute problem, led by a defense that, I mean, certainly has staked claim to maybe the best in the league.
Yeah, I think that's been the most impressive part of watching the Lions, just how well they've played defensively. And that game against Winnipeg was kind of their, stake in the ground moment across the rest of the league to say, hey, look at us, right? Because, you know, Winnipeg is still an incredible football team. So I think there was this feeling league-wide that what happened in the Grey Cup was a bit of a fluke. And I don't think enough credit was being given to the Argos. And now we've seen the Argos follow that up. But then all of a sudden when BC does that to Winnipeg, now everyone kind of raises their eyebrows. And the storylines are out there about, oh, this team's getting too old and they're not the same Bombers. And I don't believe any of that. I just think sometimes you got to give credit to the opponents, whether it be the Argos on Grey Cup Day or the BC Lions on that day. And I certainly don't think the gap between those two teams is what it was in that first game. I think, you know, whoever wins this game, I think it's going to be a really close game one way or the other. I just think they match up really well. But, yeah, it was a real statement game for the Lions, and they've been able to carry that on. Obviously, the Argos game where Vernon threw the 6 interceptions was another bit of an eyebrow raise. But they were able to bounce back from that. And just the way this defense is playing, to your point, it really is the culmination of 3 years of work because, you know, I go back and I've said this before, you look at the BC Lions defense in 2021, Rick Campbell's first year, and they came out of COVID, they weren't good. And the reason they weren't good was they decided to get young. And they were paying Riley that year, right? So that wasn't good. But so they kind of had no choice but to get young in other spots. So now that group has come of age. If you look at this Lions defense, 6 of the 12 starters, 6 of the 12 weren't with the team prior to 2021, right? So, you know, you got a lot of young guys that struggled, and I remember thinking about that 2021 team, what a poor tackling team they were. And now they just don't miss tackles. And that's the one thing. And when you can play like that, it allows you to just be so comfortable because you don't have to take the number of chances that some other teams have to take. And you can sit back and, you know, get pressure with 4 and just tackle everything underneath you. And, you know, the one thing that in that Winnipeg game that really stood out to me was they were never out of position and they made every tackle. And they've been able to kind of keep that going. And we'll see what it looks like again against the motivated Bombers team tonight.
What was such an eyebrow raiser from that game was, the way the Lions dominated the line of scrimmage. And I mean, the Bomber offensive line has been the foundation of the success this team's had over the last 5 years. I don't think we've ever seen Zach Collaros on his ass as much as he was that night. I mean, Matthew Betts is getting all the headlines because he's putting up sacks at a historic rate. But this is certainly a team, a unit where everyone is contributing. I mean, we talk a lot about Betts, but is there a player or two, Farhan, on that BC defense that if people haven't been paying attention should key in on Thursday because they've been really driving things for the Lions?
Well, there's a few of them, right? I do think Sione Tuhema in his second year now has become a fairly good option at defensive end for them. David Menard's always been solid in a rotational role, right? And then the other guy is Manny Rugamba. And we talk about those young players, Rugamba and Moget, that allow them to move on from, guys like Lucas Purifoy and other veteran players, right? Just so when you look at Rugamba coming off the edge and the way he's been able to set the edge, and when you get into the boot and RPO game, he's been really effective for them as well. So I think, Rugamba's a Sam, kind of that nickel linebacker spot. So I think some of those guys, people don't talk as much about. Ben Haladik is a real consistent tackler for them at linebacker, and Bola Combo is a highly productive guy that's always in the, total defensive stats numbers. But I think for me, they've been able to rotate guys across that defensive front, inside and outside. Josh Banks at defensive tackle is regularly drawing double teams and opening up windows and lanes for the outside players. And like I said, Rugamba coming off the edge and some of the things he's been able to do with that nickel Sam linebacker, even with one hand, right, because he's been in a cast for the other. So I think those are the ones. And again, the majority of those names are young guys that are new to the league, newer to the organization within the last 2 years, and are now comfortable in the defense and in their own roles.
TSN's Farhan Lalji with us getting ready for Lions and Bombers Thursday night at IG Field. Of course, Vernon Adams has been nicked up. What's his status? How's he feeling? When do they expect him to return? And do you see much of a drop-off to Dane Evans? I tell you, Bomber fans remember what Dane Evans did to Winnipeg last year, putting up 48 when the Bombers were 12-1. Maybe as good of a 1-2 punch at the quarterback position in the league if they need to go to it, which they have been.
Yeah, I think it is the best 1-2 punch in the league. Being able to have a guy like Dane Evans come off the bench is a luxury not a lot of teams have had. You look at a team like Ottawa, who's 4 deep at quarterback, but you don't know until you get into those opportunities, right? So we don't know what Drew Brown's going to look like until he gets a meaningful start. Maybe he's got that in him, but whereas with Dane Evans, you kind of knew that he had a body of work, and there were just very few of those guys out there. We've talked about a bit of a quarterback crisis in and around the CFL. So the Lions were lucky to be able to get him. He kind of wanted to resurrect his career, and he wanted to work under Jordan McSimic, and certainly the Ticats at the time weren't going to trade him in the East. So, BC was fortunate to get him, and he's been good, right? And, the one thing for me when he had to take over a couple of games ago was don't turn the ball over. And that really was Dane's downfall in Hamilton last season, right? He just turned the ball over too much at key times. Looked a lot like Jake Mayer's currently looking, right, which would kind of make Calgarians nervous. But he's turned that around in the opportunities that he's had, right? Even in Saskatchewan, he threw the one interception, but it was, kind of a deep shot, almost as the equivalent of a punt, and then protected the ball really well against Edmonton, right? So, and Edmonton's not Winnipeg defensively, right? I think this is going to be a different kind of test for Dane Evans, but I thought he looked really good last week. I think the game plan was good. They were able to get the running game going, so they had manageable second downs, but I think they put him in a position to succeed, and, he kind of stayed within himself and didn't try to do too much, right?
No doubt about that. And, hey, it's all about winning football games, and he and the Lions have been doing exactly that. It is a battle of first place. I think what happened earlier this season will certainly be on the minds of everyone in the stadium and certainly on the home sideline. How would you describe
They're downplaying it. They're downplaying it completely. Winnipeg is that we're not. This is not about that game. This is about this game. And then Mike O'Shea is publicly at least good at clarifying the narrative and making sure that they're singing from his songbook. But how much do you think the players are motivated by that, or do you think they're able to stick to one game at a time?
Listen, it's a great question. We certainly know what Mike O'Shea has preached, and he is the leader, and they often follow. But I can tell you, we had Brady Oliveira on a couple weeks ago, and I brought up this game and the game earlier this year, and he did mention how much of a wake-up call it was and how much they were looking forward to. And we had Rashid Bailey on, who speaks with a lot of passion and a lot of honesty, and he said straight up, they got their asses kicked, and they're looking forward for the opportunity to have it go different. What's the vibe around the Lions coming into this game? I mean, they have to be playing with a lot of confidence, although they are in a very tough spot, having played twice since the Bombers last played, and, of course, a short week coming from Saturday right into being on the road on Thursday night.
Well, they had an incredibly short week when they played them the last time in Winnipeg, much like Winnipeg had last year when they came into BC and put the wood to the Lions, right? So I'm not sure 5-day weeks matter anymore, right? And especially it being the second time they've seen them. So they've got a sense of what this team feels like. So I'm not sure how much the short week matters, and I think the Lions, if the Lions can kind of come in with that underdog mentality that, yeah, we've got some things against us, including our backup quarterback, that probably helps them. From Winnipeg's standpoint, I'm curious to see how they run the football, because they got away from the run so early in that game against BC, and that really played into the Lions' hands. And the priority the Lions made in that game was keeping Zach Collaros in the pocket. It's not about pressuring Zach. And Zach doesn't have a lot of weaknesses, right? He can play from within the pocket and have success. He's one of the few quarterbacks that can do it inside and out. However, when you're playing from within the pocket, you have to matriculate the ball down the field, as they like to say, right? It's got to be a level of consistency, first downs, manufacture it, right? When Zach breaks the pocket, that's when he can beat you with 30 and 40-yard passes. And I think the Lions were able to do that. And I think there have been some other teams that have managed to have some success keeping him in the pocket. And you know who that's hurt the most? Dalton Schoen. Because Dalton Schoen's numbers have kind of come down to earth a little bit. Now, I know there's some injuries there. He's been missing a lot of practices. But when Zach escapes, when you look at what happened last year and how it was shown that would torch BC regularly and everybody else regularly. So I think that's kind of been an interesting part. So, they will run the ball as needed in most games, but against BC, that one game, I think that was interesting to me. I'm expecting them to stay with the run more, especially Banks did have a bit of a hamstring tweak that kept him out of the second half of that Edmonton game. So if he's not as effective, it could open up some run lanes for Brady Oliveira. And, now all of a sudden, if you're having to bite down off the edge to give the run D a little bit more support, that could open up some run lanes for Collaros to get outside and get some other guys involved. So that's kind of the game within the game that I'm looking at. But, can they contain Zach Collaros? Will Winnipeg stick to the run game?
It should be a great one tomorrow night. Hey, Farhan, while we got you here, I mean, you've covered football and know that community in Vancouver very well for a long time. I'm just wondering how much the great play of the Lions is resonating. I know they opened up the upper deck for a game or two. There's been a lot of hard work with the organization and the new owner starting with last year and some of the innovative things that they did. Do the Lions have some momentum in the community?
Oh, totally, yeah. There is buzz around the team. Crowds are up. More media is talking about it. We don't have enough media, period. But those that we have, there is more Lions in the conversation. And people notice, right? It's really funny. You talk to old school CFL fans, and they'll say, the league needs to market better. Well, what does that mean? What does the marketing mean? I don't know. That's not my job, right? And so narratives get formed, and people don't really there's a narrative around what Amar Dolman has done for the org. They are doing the work, and they've always been in the community, but now they're doing it differently. Their digital team's doing such a great job. They're investing more on the marketing side and the community side, and you see more logos around, and they're doing a lot of the right things. But now the narrative is they're committing and they're marketing and they're doing all of that, and people weren't necessarily connected to David Braley, the late David Braley, when he owned the team, and David made sure all the bills were paid and things like that, but he wasn't necessarily going to be that guy to innovate and provide resources in areas he didn't necessarily understand, whereas Amar Dolman's doing all of that, and that message is being received loud and clear in the fan base. So, it's still not the Vancouver Canucks. It's still not, viewed like the NFL might be, but it is moving forward and taking steps in the right direction. And we're seeing it in crowds. And, like you go to the backyard party, right? The backyard barbecue that they have on Terry Fox Plaza before every game. And it's electric. And I remember, going and hosting the pregame show in that same plaza pre-COVID, and it was empty. Right? Like it was a couple of hundred people at best. We didn't have to worry about changing audio levels because we could be heard loud and clear. Now it's different, right? I mean, you go there and there are thousands of people that gather in the plaza for whatever band is playing, and $5 beers and, watermelon smashes with the riders and all of this kind of stuff. People are buying in. It's a good vibe around those games.
That's great news for the team, and certainly great news for the Canadian Football League. Hey, just before we go, and you mentioned NFL, I think we're all looking forward to another great season. But I know you have been the go-to guy when it comes to covering the CFL and Vancouver's prodigal son, Nathan Rourke, in his new chapter with the Jacksonville Jaguars. How's the kid doing at training camp?
Well, he's doing as good as he's allowed to do, right? Because the reps have been limited, far too limited in my mind, and certainly, from what I thought the expectations were when he first signed, right? I think he wasn't surprised when C.J. Beathard got re-signed, who, that deal happened after the Rourke deal. And, the hope was to compete for a number 2 job, and he hasn't been given that opportunity, right? Like just flat out. He is the clear number 3. Now, the good part is there's not a 4th and a 5th quarterback there. They've only got 3 in. So he's making the team. He's going to be on the active roster because the NFL can now dress 3 and will be making a full salary. And all of that stuff is good. So far in training camp, though, I thought the rep division between he and Beathard amongst second and third string players would be 60-40. It's probably been around 80-20, right? But every rep he gets, he's doing well. Like the day before I got there, he was 6 for 6 throwing the ball. The day I got there, he had, 10 reps of 11 on 11. He was 3 for 3 passing. Pulled the ball on a read option, and then in Skelly, he was 3 of 4 with 1 being a drop. Not a lot of reps, but he's making the most of the few that he's got. I talked to the offensive coordinator. They think he's doing really well. They're really impressed with how he's processing the offense. And, we talked, and he's like, yeah, it has been difficult. It hasn't been what I expected from that perspective, but I'm in this for the long haul, and I know the preseason is going to mean everything. So he's going to go down to Texas Stadium and play the Dallas Cowboys at Jerry's World, and he's going to get a ton of reps in that game. Because in the NFL, the star quarterbacks don't play a lot. That last preseason game, they're going to host Miami. He's probably going to get every rep, right? Like he's going to get tons of opportunities. He knows that not only is he auditioning for the Jaguars, but he's auditioning for 31 other teams, right? If he puts in a really good preseason performance to back up what he did in the CFL. So, and even their OC told me that if he does well in those great preseason games, or in those 3 preseason games, it may change what we do with our reps. Not to say he'd get to number 2 right away, but they might start giving him more reps. And so, that's what it'll come down to. But they think, and he said this to me, the OC, he said, arm strength-wise, talent-wise, he's got everything it takes to be successful in this league. We don't have any concerns about any of his abilities, and we love how he's learned the offense from spring to now. So they don't have concerns about his mental acumen. Now it just comes down to experience and opportunity, and we'll see what that looks like in the preseason.
Well, it really will be interesting. Usually the NFL preseason can't end soon enough, but I think for folks that are, invested in Nathan Rourke, we'll be very excited to see what he can do in the preseason, and then we'll see what happens if he ever gets in behind a pretty stud number 1 in Trevor Lawrence there with the Jags. Farhan, enjoy the game tomorrow night. Thanks very much for the time. Be well, and we'll talk to you soon.
All right, buddy. It's been too long. We'll talk again soon.
All right, good stuff with Farhan. Tomorrow we're going to have a little bit more. I think Bombing's going to drop by, talk about the big game before it happens, and the man that will call that game on TSN, our buddy Dustin Nielsen, going to be cranking out a big lock shop for the CFL tomorrow. But Dusty's also going to make an appearance, and we'll get his thoughts on the game he'll be calling tomorrow night from IG Field, Bombers and Lions, for top spot in the Western Division. All right, Scotty Billeck is on deck. Before we bring Scott in, Again, we had Derek Taylor on. You know the drill, folks. Princess Auto Tailgate, 5:30 tomorrow. Pop by the CJOB broadcast booth and basically ask Derek Taylor for his autograph as if he's Doug Brown. And bonus points if you can hand your phone to Doug Brown and then ask him to take a picture of you and Doug Brown, with Doug Brown actually being Derek Taylor. I'm really looking forward to the feedback from all of that. But before the game, anybody going to the game, whether you're popping by there or not, get to the Princess Auto Tailgate Zone. $5 beers, $3.50 popping hot dogs. My guy DJ Finesse is going to be spinning it up. It is the place to be. It looks like it's going to be another gorgeous day. Get it started early and get ready to bring it at 7:30 when the Bombers kick off against the Lions. Princess Auto, proud sponsors of the Bombers, and of course, Winnipeg Sports Talk, and the place where you'll find the best deals on the most unique assortment of tools and equipment around. Everything you need to complete the projects on your list or start something new is at Princess Auto. 2 Winnipeg locations, Panet Road, Portage Avenue West, and you can always shop online 24/7, 365 at princessauto.com. If you need something to Consolidated Supply, I'd maybe go in the morning or early afternoon because I know the fellas down there are going to be getting ready for that game tomorrow night. That being said, they're busy right now because they are the leaders in irrigation supply at Consolidated irrigation systems, I should say. And Consolidated Supply is also the leaders in artificial turf. If you're thinking about not wanting to mow grass anymore, or maybe put that dream putting green in the backyard, Spicy, Joe, the gang, they can help you with that. And listen, they're the exclusive club car dealer in Manitoba. So brand new golf carts, things that frankly aren't even golf carts if you ask me. I mean, transport, electric vehicles, those sort of things. They've got them all, and great deals on used golf carts as well. And other great options for your property, including hot tubs and amazing outdoor kitchens. And of course, they are the experts in small engine parts and repair as well. Pop by and see them. Consolidated Supply showroom, open to the public, 1395 Niagara Road East, or check them out online at cte.ca. You got your blue ready for tomorrow? If you don't, there's only one place to go. That is Royal Sports at 750 Pembina Highway. A great selection of Bomber merch, including tons of exclusives that you won't find anywhere else. While you're at it, you can pop over to the Jet side of things. Maybe you pick up a Rasmus Kupari jersey who just signed a new deal. We'll get to that with Scott Billeck in just a minute. Whether it's Blue Jays, Raps, all the new NFL merch that's coming out right now, Royal Sports has it all, not to mention soccer, baseball, tennis, tons of disc golf equipment, and a massive selection of bikes. Royal Sports, 750 Pembina Highway. It must be seen to be believed. And you can follow them on Instagram at Royal Sports Pembina. And of course, if you're not going to the game tomorrow night, the next best place to watch it is at your local Boston Pizza. I'll tell you what, I bet there'll be a lot of people at BP for Brad Katona's next fight. We'll talk about that with Billeck and with Aaron Bronsteter, but the home of the UFC is BP. I watched the fights on Saturday there. Just an awesome atmosphere. Not to mention those schooners, BP wings, gourmet pizzas, and more made it that much better. Hey, if you're staying at home tonight, though, you can always get the great taste of Boston Pizza by ordering online at bostonpizza.com. All right, we got a lot of things to talk to Billeck about. Let's get him in here. Scotty Billeck from the Winnipeg Sun joins us. What's up? How are you?
Yeah, you're right. There's so much going on in the city right now, and outside of the city from people that are from this city. So yeah, it's a busy day, as I think Remis said, off the big week in Winnipeg sports for the summer at least. So yeah.
Hey, you know what? Just I know this came out this morning, but just so we don't gloss over it or get carried away, big class of 2023.
Yeah.
Manitoba Sports Hall of Fame inductees, including the Turtle Man himself, Milt Stiegel, going into the hall.
Yeah. I mean, a big day. I mean, we were talking in the green room earlier too about what is this? Bronstein's?
Yeah, Terry Bronstein, the 1965 Terry Bronstein rink, which I pulled out of air. 65 Brier champions. That must be Terry Bronstein's rink. Noah's son Dan, and really a legendary curling club. But I mean, the Bronstein rink, builder Alex Gardner, who was the longtime Bison coach. My good pal Byron Goodwin was his coach, kind of helped him make one of the Canadian Olympic teams. We've got a builder, Brett Bottomley from cross country skiing, swimmer Kelly Stefanishin from Winnipeg, and long distance runner Chris Glowak as well. But certainly, as we get ready for this Bomber game tomorrow, Milt will be at the top of that list just with his incredible popularity and what he did for fans here for so long. Great class for the Hall, though, coming in November.
Yeah, I mean, 14 years for Stiegel here, right? 2 CFL records, one that still stands, well, multiple CFL records, but the big one that still stands is his touchdowns and receiving touchdowns. He was passed by Giroy, obviously, on the Giroy Simon on the yardage there. But yeah, I mean, about time for Stiegel to go in, I suppose. I mean, you can only do, I mean, I think Stiegel's been given pretty much everything in this town that you can possibly give a person. So street name, order for the buffalo hunt, I believe. Key to the city at one point. I mean, everything, right? So, but yeah, some other guys there. Obviously, the marathon runner there, Glowak, I believe it is. He was the first Manitoban to win the Manitoba Marathon. He did it twice, actually. He did it in back-to-back years. I believe it was 97 and 98. And he was a top Manitoban a couple times in the 90s as well in the race. So, yeah, and then Stefanishin, Pan Am gold in 99 here. Won gold here in her hometown. Went on to Australia that summer. I believe it was in Sydney, right? The Sydney Olympics in 2000. And then she was there as well, competing. I think, did a lot of backstroke, I believe, 100 meter, 200 meter, and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's a good class. It usually is. And yeah, I mean, Stiegel obviously being, let's say, the head of that class, or maybe the most recognizable name, of course, on that list.
Scotty, listen, there's a couple other things I wanted to get to right off the bat, but I promised that we would get into this with you because we do actually have some Jets news. It's been very quiet, like it's been around the entire National Hockey League. But 2 years for Rasmus Kupari, former first rounder, coming in as the kind of third piece along with Velarde and Iafallo from the LA Kings, and a 2-year deal at $1 million. I think we all knew that this number would come in and around this point. I mean, 2 years gives him a chance to kind of, get his feet wet here in Winnipeg and hopefully raise his value for the club for a new deal. I can't imagine this is really a surprise at all, but what I am really interested in is, what this young man might be able to do with a better opportunity than he sort of had in LA, playing a little bit further down a roster that didn't have a lot of upward mobility for him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's it for him, right? It's opportunity, and like you said, I mean, a bit of a kind of a prove it contract, or here's you give him, he makes $250,000 or $225,000 more each season now than the league minimum. So there's some let's say just stability, right? Don't have to think about a contract now for the next couple of years, and you can go out and play and like you said, earn some more money. I mean, the cap could go up by about $9 million in the next. I'm not saying Kupari is going to be a $5-6 million player going forward, but who knows, right? A lot of the time with some of these players that don't maybe figure it out in their first team, or they don't pan out as first rounders in the first. Sometimes they go off and find it in other places, in other cities, different opportunities, teams that are willing to maybe take a little more risk, or just find what makes those guys tick, that sort of thing. So yeah, I mean, I think it's a good contract for the Jets. I think it's a good contract for Kupari. Stays in the NHL, and I don't know, he'll figure it out. So yeah, I think it's a good signing on both sides. I think the Jets are down to, is it 2 RFAs now? I think it's Logan Stanley now and just Declan Chisholm, those two. So just 2 now. So that kind of business is getting to the point where that's almost done, and we kind of wait and see if anything else is going to change this summer. But
yeah, indeed.
Yeah, who knows?
And again, take this for what it's worth. I mean, Daily Faceoff just kind of throws guys in and puts them at their positions and kind of where you think the pecking order is. But Kupari, I mean, right now, was in there at the 4C spot. and
That's
it's
where
funny.
I have him too.
You know, it's you got Connor Scheifele, Ehlers, Perfetti, Villardi, Iafallo, Lowry, Niederreiter, Appleton, or Barron. Take your pick. The one guy would be up, one guy would be on the other line.
Yeah.
The Nemetsnikov, who's a real utility player, can play everywhere, and then Kupari. You wonder what that means for David Gustafsson.
It means the wing, Huss. I think, right?
The press box if everyone's healthy.
Exactly, right? Like,
right now he's not in this 12.
I like David Gustafsson, super nice guy, all that stuff, but he just hasn't really kind of panned out so far, right? Like, it's not that he hasn't been given opportunities at that fourth line center spot. He just didn't really take advantage, especially 2 years ago. And I remember back to that camp. He started on the quote unquote fifth line in that camp, which was really indicative, I think, of how the coaching staff kind of felt about him there. But when he went into last year's training camp, he was already the fourth line center, like right from the start. And they gave him the opportunity. He stayed healthy for the most part, and then he played, but it just wasn't working for him. And so they moved him out to the wing. I'm just not sure it's working out there either, right? So we'll see. I mean, David's a great player in terms of his defensive play. He's a great defensive player. Just haven't really seen that offensive touch at all, really. Outside of his first goal, I think it was against the Sharks, that one where he just, that was a laser beam. But other than that, like,
that was in 1920.
Yeah, that was a long time ago, right?
Like, it's wild. If I would have told you, if you had asked me just without looking, how many games did David Gustafsson play for the Winnipeg Jets last year? I would have guessed like 20. He was in 46.
70 or 40, 46.
He was in 46. And again, I realize it's limited minutes and you might not see him out there very much, but, really didn't play at all. I mean, 4 games one year, 2 games the other year, but got in 46 last year. I mean, listen, the guy had the worst absolute luck. Every time he got called up, he got knocked out for a long period of time, and that's what it was. But, that's going to be one of the real interesting things about training camp this year is, we're going to be looking to see who's on the top line. I mean, if Scheifele's still here, is he playing center? Who's he playing with? I mean, obviously, I think he will go back to center. It'd be almost hard to imagine them finishing up where they left off last year, considering the way things went. But whatever. I mean, those are the big stories. But when you look at, those guys battling for spots in the bottom 6, I mean, I certainly imagine Kupari's going to get an opportunity to get in there right away. But certainly, I mean, Jansen Harkins would love another crack. Does he fit in there? I mean, who will be the guys? And they're probably, I still think they're only going to carry one extra forward, Scott, because with, unless something changes with the blue line and a couple guys leave, you probably have to have 8 guys on the roster unless you were losing someone for nothing on waivers.
Well, I mean, I wrote about this on defense last week. And I was like, I basically said the defense is set, like the top 6 guys are set, and it is, right? Like who's coming into that top 6 right now? And there's nobody, right? I mean, I think, Dylan Sandberg won out that job last year. By the end, he played in the playoffs, and he's going to be in the top 6 starting this year. So, that leaves Logan Stanley, Ville Heinola, Declan Chisholm, all fighting out for what? A press box spot or maybe a rotation? But I'm not even sure there's going to be much of a rotation starting this year because, like I said, the way that Sandberg played, especially, down the stretch there and that sort of thing, I think he won that job. I think, that became very evident.
If there's a rotation, mean, it's probably going in for Nate Schmidt. I mean, I could see him maybe taking a good time off. But
Nate Schmidt played well last year when he was playing with Dylan Sandberg. So, this is the thing. Like,
you're right, though. It's top Schmidt 6 and everybody else.
Well, but I'm just, and now I'm looking at the forwards. Unless something changes, I mean, I think the forward lines are set too, right? Like, I mean, I don't think Jansen Harkins is coming into the lineup. Like, I don't think he has the favor of Rick Bowness. I mean, I think we've seen that last season. So unless Jansen Harkins could come in and have a great training camp, but he's done that before. Like, I mean, this isn't to knock Jansen Harkins, but the knock against him is he's really good in practice. He's really good in training camp, but when he hits the ice, it's not always as good. And yeah, there's been flashes. Don't get me wrong. Like, there's been flashes. He's played well. He's had a couple of games where he's had a couple of goals in the night, but then it just goes silent for a while, right? And he doesn't he plays better up in the lineup, and he has, and that's what he's shown. When he plays lower down the lineup, he doesn't play as well. It doesn't suit his game very well. But when you're in that spot, especially for a guy like Jansen, you got to learn how to adapt, and he hasn't really learned how to adapt. And there's no room in the top 6 for Jansen Harkins, nor has he earned it, right? So I mean, that's the conundrum with Jansen Harkins. I'm honestly, I was surprised he didn't go to LA. I'm surprised that they haven't really traded him. I'm pretty sure he's asked out. I think that might have been
here's the
public.
thing.
I'm not
There's
sure,
a Jansen Harkins or two on every team in the NHL.
There is, exactly, right?
And that's why people are like, how can you lose him for nothing? Guys, that's why they invented the waiver wire, because there's some guys that just aren't getting a chance, and they're not giving up assets to get them, but there might be a hole somewhere else. And listen, the Jets have benefited from that in some cases by picking up guys. Axel's a perfect example. But I mean, here's the thing: if Axel Jonsson-Fjällby is the 13th forward, again, that means Gus might be available. The depth spots on this team to me will be a fascinating battle in camp. Because at this point, we're not talking about contracts like, Declan Chisholm's pretty much on the squad because they won't want to miss him on waivers, and that's why they're going to carry 8 defensemen. It's a different story with the forwards, with a lot of guys that may or may not have the opportunity to even barge into a spot or consideration for an opening day roster spot.
Well, that's the thing. Like, I don't think the Jets got deeper in that Dubois trade to play Jansen Harkins or even David Gustafson, right? Like, I think they realized that they needed some replacements and some better players to play in those positions because, they lacked a little bit of that last year. They gave more minutes to the fourth line last year. That's something they did quite a bit of, but the scoring wasn't there. I mean, we all remember how last year went for quite a long time where, if the top 2 lines weren't scoring, the Jets weren't scoring at all, right? And so, they have a little bit more now. Like, you look at those third and fourth lines now. You look at the fourth line with like a Barron and an Appleton potentially. I mean, that could be. You should expect some goals from your fourth line at that point, right? The third line, you have Niederreiter and I'm missing the name right now,
Iafallo?
And Iafallo and Adam Lowry. Like, that line should score and also be a good checking line. And then you have your top 6 who should still find ways to score. It's not going to be probably the same. You don't have Wheeler who has 65 points or whatever, and you don't have Pierre-Luc Dubois and his 30 goals, but you're still going to get scoring from that because you have a lot of talent there. But they've spread out the scoring a little bit more. The one thing, to me, that trade was very much a trade to kind of fix some of the issues that they've had, which is their forward depth hasn't really been that great. And when they've called guys up, those guys aren't scoring either. And oftentimes they need to. You need those guys to step up and do something, and they haven't done it. So that trade filled a few holes, and I think that means that I think the writing's on the wall for some of these guys that haven't really been able to kind of break in and produce and really kind of hold down and lock down a position. So we'll see how training camp goes. But, I mean, I'm looking at the forward lines right now, the ones on Daily Faceoff, the ones that I've projected, ones that other people are projecting, and what's changing, right? Like, I don't know yet. Unless Scheifele gets traded and whatever, I don't know what's changing out of that.
Well,
that top 12
what
right
might
now.
change? I know a lot of people just assume that they're going to go back to what they started the first game last year with, of Scheifele, Connor, and Nikolai Ehlers, and I guess I'd be here for it. But when you bring in players like Balharry, and specifically Iafallo, if Rick Bowness has Mark Scheifele on his team and he's going to throw him back out there on center, I wouldn't be surprised if Alex Iafallo doesn't get a shot at playing on the top line, not because he's going to go and score 40 goals, but because he's an excellent and responsible two-way player that can contribute offensively. And I mean, it's great if you have these guys running around and scoring 1 or 2, but if they're not playing a lick of defense or things aren't happening in their own end, how far does that get you? And I think that they will be looking for the right mix. And I'm not even sure. I mean, we've seen them try Ehlers and Scheifele together plenty before. I mean, it hasn't always really clicked.
And I think, and I think with Ehlers, I think the one reason why you brought Vladimir Nemestikov back is because Ehlers and him played well together, right? So you're probably going to have those two playing together. Would it be surprising to see Gabe Vilardi on the top line with Scheifele and Iafallo either? Like, I don't think so.
Well, that could be it, but
Because,
then where's
I mean,
Kyle Connor? Then, I mean, you got what, Perfetti playing with,
Well,
like, who's number 2
Well,
center?
yeah, so that's
the
the thing.
first question, right?
Well, I know. Yeah, I know. I mean, maybe it is Balharry, right? And then Nemestikov's playing the wing somewhere. I don't know,
Yeah.
right? Like,
the
I mean,
good thing about Nemestikov is he can play everywhere, and
Yeah,
if
he's so
he's on the
versatile.
3rd or 4th line, no problem. He'll go out there and do it. Some guy's hurt, or a guy gets a 10-minute misconduct, you pop him in there. There was some chemistry with he and Nikolai Ehlers.
Yeah.
And listen, if Ehlers can produce at a high level with the guy playing on that kind of a salary, that's a great thing for a team when you're able to move it around. There certainly is some more options, but unless Niederreiter is in the top 6, if Niederreiter shifts down to the 3rd line to play with Adam Lowry, whether it's with Barron or whether it's with Appleton or even potentially Nemestikov, I think you're at a situation where maybe Ehlers, they try to see, can Ehlers click with whoever is playing in that 2C position? Balharry probably at the start, or potentially Cole Perfetti, and then take it from there. And as far as Kupari goes, we kind of started this conversation on, I think he's probably a 4th line player that, they kind of see whether he's capable of more as the season goes on.
Yeah, I mean, big body too, right? Like, that's the one thing I think the Jets like about Kupari is he's big. I think he's like 6'4", something like that, around 200 pounds. We'll see. He's a 1st-round player, right? So, I mean, obviously the Kings thought he would be a good player. He reminds me a little bit maybe of Christian Vesalainen, and kind of like how it just hasn't more worked out as a 1st-rounder. But, the way that I've seen Kupari play, at least, he looks better than Vesalainen, a little more engaged and that sort of thing. So,
he's got big league speed. He's got big league speed. He's 6'2", 200 listed, so he's not
I thought it was
massive.
But that's not bad for a 4th-line center, and it's not bad for a guy who, like you said, he has speed. So, I think, again, like I said, I think the Jets changed a lot of the complexion of their depth, and it's going to be an interesting training camp this year. Like, it's all the lines. Like last year we came in training camp, I think we kind of knew exactly how things were going to shake down. This year, I think we know who's going to be in the top 12 in the forward contingent, but where are they going to be, right? And how are these lines? Because even like losing 2 top 6 guys like you did in Wheeler and Dubois really throws a wrench into things, and so it's not a bad wrench, just like a wrench into, like, how do we, who's going to play with who develops some chemistry in training camp. Scheifele will have a say, I'm sure, in who he wants to play with, right? That sort of thing. So, and the other thing is Scheifele still going to be here, right? We still got a month to go before. Well, we got a month and a half to go really before training camp kicks off. So yeah, we'll see what goes on. So.
No doubt about it. Hey, before we go, I know you'll be at Canada Life Center on Friday night covering the playoff game. It was unfortunate, from a Winnipeg perspective, that the Sea Bears weren't able to win, because they would have skipped this game altogether. But man, I mean, the story really is the support from the city for this club. And as we talked yesterday, they had a couple 1,000 or so seats in the lower bowl. Those are all gone, selling into the upper bowl for the first time ever. And I can't help but think how cool the atmosphere is going to be at that rink, or I guess technically gym, on Friday night for a game that really does mean something for the franchise. And it's going to have more fans than we've ever seen to watch a Winnipeg pro basketball team, probably since the first Thunder game of all time in the 90s, where they had like 11,000.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that could be the number that they might get to, right? It might be bigger than that. Who knows, right? I mean, they've opened up those 4 sections so far. Just talking to the team earlier before I came on, and, it's obviously open to demand. So they'll keep opening sections as long as people are buying tickets. But, I mean, I'm looking at these tickets. Ticketmaster up. I know Remo had it up earlier. I mean, it's $15 plus their taxes and fees and all that. But it's like $21.75 to sit in the upper deck to watch a game, which is, I mean, again, if you haven't been there, and I'm not trying to shill for the team, but it's a fun time, right? I'm looking forward to going and covering that game on Friday, because it's a fun time. But like the fans, and then, like, I mean, the fans always create the atmosphere and that sort of thing. But like, really, at these games, like, it's very much about that, and it's very diverse. Like, it really brings a lot of Winnipeg together, and a lot of Winnipeg that you don't always necessarily see at a hockey game or whatever, and it's a good fun time, and they care about the fans, and it's an interesting. It's been really interesting to watch the whole year, and if you do go on Friday, it's the last game of the year. the last home game, at least of the year for the Sea Bears. And you're going to be a part of the biggest crowd in CBL history again. So if you're there last Friday or Saturday, that's about to get.
Just be looking
you can already see it, right? So
yeah, same opponent, but looking for a different result. And again, if you're a Sea Bears fan, check out the interview from yesterday's show with Jelani Watson-Gale. Billeck, I'm unfortunately going to be out of town, so I won't see you on Friday, but we'll talk about it next week, hopefully about the Sea Bears heading to the championship tournament out in BC. Have a great weekend, and thanks for doing this.
Yeah, anytime, guys. Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks.
Good stuff. There's Scotty Billeck. All right, hold on a second. Billeck, before you go, we never even got to this, and this is a good tee up for Aaron Bronsteter coming up. Yeah, sorry, there's a lot going on.
It's all good.
We're going to have Aaron Bronsteter come in and talk a little bit about Brad Katona.
Yeah.
But I know you've been, always been a big fan of UFC. Follow this very closely. Winnipeg native Brad Katona, who looks like a librarian, but knocks people out like the baddest MF you've ever seen, is on his way to the Ultimate Fighter finale for the second time. And what a wild story is. We've played this. He came in studio with us in 2018. And I was just fascinated with this guy that, as I say, looked every bit of the engineering student that he was at the time, and yet was going in to be an MMA fighter. And this has taken him all around the world. He's been training in Ireland with, McGregor's coach and group, John Kavanagh. And now he's on the verge of making history after winning an absolute war last night on TSN. What a cool story for Brad Katona from the Peg.
It's a great redemption story. One of the things about being a UFC fighter that if you're not winning all your fights, especially if you're a guy that comes to that, you end up cut, right? And it's very much, there's a lot of turnover, especially in those lower ranks when you're trying to make up, and you really just got to string wings together. And one of the hardest things to do, and one of the beauties of the Ultimate Fighter too, but one of the hardest things to do is ever get back into the UFC. And the thing with the Ultimate Fighter is that it often gives guys that kind of chance. It's the guy that Timur Valiev that he fought last night and beat via split decision. He had been in the UFC too, so these are guys. And one of the things that Conor McGregor said on the show last night is you got to be weary of these kind of cagey veteran guys, and Katona is one of them. Same with Valiev, right? And so, it's been an interesting year on the Ultimate Fighter. Obviously, Katona started on Michael Chandler's team, and which has provided a really interesting dynamic because he's John Kavanagh and Owen Roddy and those guys from the SBG gym in Ireland, Straight Blast gym in Ireland, where Conor McGregor's out of. That's where Brad Katona's been since 2017, and he was basically being coached by the other team and not his coaches, and so he ended up switching before the semifinal fight, which was last night, and he's now back on McGregor's team now. And the one thing he said on the show, and I haven't talked to Brad yet, but I'm hoping to in the next day or so, is he said on that, he's like, he just felt free, right? Like he was with his guys again. He was with his family again. And he came out in that fight, an unbelievable fight. Like if you get a chance, if you can find it somewhere, I would watch it. I mean, it was a war from the start. Brad Katona got busted up early in the first round, bleeding all to the side of the head.
Big time.
But it gets a nice takedown early on, and then gets taken down at the end of the round. And then it was just a bit of a good sparring match. But it was a really good technical fight. Like, I mean, that's one of the things about Brad Katona. He's very much a technical fighter. He has a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's a karate guy, but he's really good technically. He's got a great left hand. That's what he's known for. He can knock guys out. He's got knockout power in that hand. You're always rooting for the Winnipegger in this one, and he won it before. I think it was season 20, season 21. I think he won. We're in season 31.
You know what?
Now.
We're gonna find out right away. Bronsteter's got all the info on that. But you know what? We may have to get the fellas together for the championship fight.
Yeah,
which,
that's gonna be a good one.
as we're going to find out in a minute, looks like it's going to be in Boston. But we'll do it again next week, Scotty. Thanks for jumping on, as always.
Yeah, anytime, guys.
There's Scott Billeck from the Winnipeg Sun. We are going to talk about Brad Katona with one of the nominated for MMA Journalist of the Year, our guy, Aaron Bronsteter. Just before we do that, if you've been If you saw that tweet last night about the red hot picks from Assiniboia Downs, stick around. We will have those picks. And we do have a Coolbet exclusive for the Bombers and Sea Bears, which we'll get to in a minute. But do have to thank our friends at Little Brown Jug. Long weekend is here, gang. I know there's been a lot of issues with the liquor stores and whatnot. Why not just stock up on Winnipeg's favorite local beer? And you can do that without hitting a Manitoba Liquor Mart. All you need to do is head on down to Little Brown Jug in the Exchange, William Avenue. If you plan your time right, can have a couple out on that beautiful patio they built at the end of last year. Or if it's too hot, head inside, have a few, and pick up everything you need for the long weekend. And may I suggest my personal favorite for summer drinking, the new generic lager. All there at Little Brown Jug. Of course, check it out online as well as their seasonal beers, littlebrownjug.ca. And if you are getting to a beer store elsewhere, you can find Little Brown Jug wherever they sell great beer. And 1919, don't forget, is at the stadium. You can find that at the Poutineery and the hometown concession stands tomorrow on both the east and the west side. Well, I just got the email. The countdown is on. Remo will be handling the show on Friday because I am taking off to Aikens Lake, my favorite 3 days of the year, for some world-class fishing and even more world-class hospitality from the Turenne family. I'll crank out a bunch of stuff on our social media channels and hopefully have some monsters. It sounds like they're biting and they're big these days. A guy earlier this week from Texas caught a master angler walleye the first day of his trip, a master angler lake trout the second day of his trip, and a master angler pike the third day of his trip. Never heard of anything like that. So hopefully we're going at the right time, but it's always a great time for Aikens Lake. Incredible corporate event, maybe if you want to take out some of your top clients, or a bit of a retreat for people that have been Zooming for the last 3 or 4 years. Find out more at aikenslake.com. Give our pal Pit Turenne a hit up on Twitter at Aikens Lake for more information about booking into 2024 right now. Tough one for the Gold Eyes last night. They are in Kansas City, first place team, big long series. And listen, this has been a real tough series for the Fish on the field. Been a great one, though, off the field. And one of the biggest days of the year is coming up. And that, of course, is the Bark in the Park, Saturday, August 12th. Tickets are going very fast for that. Go to the Gold Eyes website. They tweeted out some information on that. We'll get info on that from Andrew Collier in the next couple days on the program. And then, of course, next week is the big week. Reggie Abercrombie, jersey retirement, the Reggie bobblehead giveaway, fireworks, all happening on Friday, August 11th. And I'll be missing maybe part of the show that day because I'm going to be interviewing Reggie at the big luncheon downtown, which I'm really looking forward to being a part of, to see Reggie again. It was one of our favorites and certainly our favorite guy from the Gold Eyes ever to interview. So I'm going to be doing that with Brody Jackson and really looking forward to that. But get to goldeyes.com. And if you want to get in on the Bark in the Park, I suggest you get your tickets now. You know what? We'll get to the Coolbet lines in a bit. We'll also get to Assiniboia Downs in a bit. But I did mention that we do have a new lock shop up for the Wyndham Championship. Very interesting run. That is this week's event on the PGA Tour. We'll give you an update on that tomorrow, as well as all the other golf happenings, always brought to you by Breezy Bend. If you're thinking about making a long-term home for you and your family at a top private golf course in Winnipeg, Breezy is the spot. Get on the waiting list now, though, for 2024 because space is limited. You can do that by going to breezybend.ca or give our pal Corey Johnson, GM of the Year in Manitoba, a buzz, and he'll get you on there. And hopefully we'll see you out at Breezy. Just opened the new 7th and 15th holes last week. They are absolutely beautiful, and the course could not be better. All right, we mentioned Brad Katona, Winnipeg native. Won last night on The Ultimate Fighter and is going back to the finals with Conor McGregor in his corner. No better person to talk about that than our pal Aaron Bronsteter from TSN. All right, let's welcome in our pal Aaron Bronsteter, who once again has been nominated for the MMA Journalist of the Year. Congratulations on that, my friend, and great to talk to you again. What's going on?
Hey, it's great to be on with you guys. Yeah, cool. 2 years in a row, right? I mean, for a guy who's covering a sport for a Canadian network to be recognized at the World MMA Awards is it's a pretty cool honor, and I'm humbled by it. It's really cool thing.
I gotta tell you, just before we get into the main topic, it is so cool to see what you have sort of built there at TSN as being the MMA guy. I mean, we first met back, I want to say, in Dallas at the Super Bowl when you were hustling for Landsberg and doing a million different jobs for OTR. Been quite the journey to get to this point.
Yeah, you've seen the hustle, no pun intended. I mean, to get from where I was to where I am, it was mostly behind the scenes stuff. I was doing guest booking for Off the Record with Michael Landsberg, and then I ended up helping you guys out and all of the different radio stations and TV shows out for some years as the head of talent relations at TSN, just helping book all of the different shows with guests when we had people come in for the car wash at TSN and connecting those. And then, of course, now doing mixed martial arts. So it's been an interesting road to where I ended up. And again, to be recognized as a Journalist of the Year for MMA after having kind of a non-traditional start to where I am it's just very cool. And yeah, it's still a real dream come true to have this job.
Well, I'll tell you what, it is very well deserved, and it's great to see. Now, we wanted to bring you on. This is a big card on the weekend, which I actually did watch. It was a hell of a lot of fun. But last night, our old pal, Brad Katona, who we first met when he jumped into our studio on 1290, when he was an engineering student at the University of Manitoba. And he looked every bit a guy that would be spending 20 hours in study hall, turns into a guy that goes out and wins the Ultimate Fighter. And now he's back after winning an absolute war last night to be the first, to be on the verge of being the first fighter ever to win this thing twice. We'll maybe get to his past and where he's been over the last little while. But I'm turning the TV on last night. I'm seeing Conor McGregor in his corner. I'm seeing Brad Katona fight in a fight that as good as any that you'll see, a little gory at times. How significant is this for Brad and his career to once again be in the final of the Ultimate Fighter?
Well, it's huge. And the funny thing is, he never should have been released in the first place, in my opinion. If you look at his road to get to the UFC, he was on the Ultimate Fighter and faced, when the show started, in my opinion, the two guys that I thought had the best chance of winning were Bryce Mitchell and Kyler Phillips. And he went and beat both those guys. You know, I didn't think Brad had a hope against those two guys, to be perfectly honest, at the time. He goes in, beats both those guys up a weight class because he's a 35er. He does it at 145 pounds and then wins, gets into the UFC, and ends up losing to a guy named Merab Dvalishvili, who, for a lot of people's money, is the best or second best bantamweight in the world right now. And then also to another guy named Hunter Azure, who coincidentally ended up being his teammate on this season of The Ultimate Fighter. But really shouldn't have gotten let go. That was a split decision loss, very close fight. Somebody who has belonged in the UFC this entire time. But of course, you know, business is business, gets released for whatever reason, took it really personally, and then ended up basically fighting in an organization called Brave, which is in the Middle East, and they typically bring fighters in from North America to get squashed against these fighters that are from the Middle Eastern or Baltic regions. He goes in and beats all these killers and becomes the champion over there. So then he doesn't even get the call to be on the Ultimate Fighter. He trains with John Kavanagh, who's Conor McGregor's coach, and occasionally with Conor himself, even though there are several weight classes apart, and basically comes on the plane with John Kavanagh over from Ireland and tries to lobby to get onto the show. They bring him on. He ends up on the show that way, even though he was probably a better candidate for the show than a lot of the other former UFC fighters that they brought back, because the way that they did the teams was it was prospects versus ex-UFC fighters. He was probably more qualified, and then somehow ends up on the show as a result of that, basically almost through nepotism rather than the skill that you know earned him a spot on that show to begin with. Ends up getting on it, and now here we are He's now in the finals again. He's the only Canadian to ever win a traditional season of The Ultimate Fighter, and now he could be the only fighter to ever win 2 seasons of The Ultimate Fighter. So a pretty cool story. And I told you guys this before we started. I'm sorry to keep rambling on here, but somebody had told me, somebody that was in the know, had told me that the 2 guys that were brought over with Connor got knocked out because this show is pre-taped, it's not live. So every time I watched Brad fight on this season, I thought I was going to be, leave. I kind of had let my guard down. I was like, oh, he's going to leave and it's going to be really sad. He's going to get finished. Ends up in the finale. So it was a big surprise to me that he won both of his fights on the Ultimate Fighter, because somebody had told me that the opposite was going to happen. And I guess they were wrong and mistaken, or they had been given a bad tip.
Now, I mean, just fill people in on what the Ultimate Fighter is, because it's a little different than regular UFC cards. I mean, it's sort of the combination of a reality show and, what you'd see on a Saturday night card.
Yeah, so this is the 31st season, and the formula for this show has remained largely the same. They bring a bunch of fighters on, they put them in a house together, they have them separated into teams. This time there was a different kind of format where it was, again, the prospects against UFC veterans, and they split the teams up that way and kind of seeded them in advance. But these guys are then matched up. The coaches typically pick the matchups, and then once they get to the semifinals, like Brad did, the coaches meet with Dana White and they say, this is who I think should fight so-and-so, this is who I think should fight this guy, and then Dana White ultimately makes the decision of who's going to fight who in the semifinals. So he ends up fighting the guy where, if you saw Connor and Michael Chandler talking to Dana White, they said, we think Teamer is going to be the guy who wins out of the bantamweight division. And they end up matching up Brad with Teamer. Brad ends up switching teams to Conor McGregor because those are his regular coaches. He ends up switching teams for the semis, trains with his regular coaches. He was training with Michael Chandler's team leading up to this point, and ends up getting matched up against Teamer, who's a really, really tough opponent, and he ends up winning.
You mentioned the switch. Like, I knew that Brad had been training in Ireland for a while. I didn't know that he had that connection to Kavanaugh and the McGregor camp. But when I saw it earlier on, I probably picked it up a little midway through. He was on the other team. He was on the red team. And Connor's team was getting their asses handed to them in every single fight. And it ended up where I think the blue team, the McGregor squad, won the final fight, or they would have literally lost every one. How did it come about that Brad went from the red team and is now, as we saw last night on the TSN, has Conor McGregor in his corner and will be representing McGregor in the final when they hit the pay-per-view in Boston?
Yeah, so when the semis are put together, because he was facing a teammate, they basically give you the option of you basically end up either on a gray team, which is kind of like you're training with the same kind of coaches, like the coaches kind of split off and they each coach a different fighter. In fact, last week's show was really interesting because they had 2 fighters also from that veteran team fighting at 155 pounds. And if you watch it, it's one of the most interesting fights you can watch because there was no coaching. There's also no fans. So it's basically at the UFC's production facility and it's dead silent. Like sometimes they'll cut to McGregor talking on the sidelines, but that's it. There's no commentary. So you're actually listening to a fight and watching a fight with none of the normal surroundings of a UFC fight. It was really cool to watch it that way because you can really watch the nuances of the fight and really kind of judge for yourself what's happening without having to listen to the commentary, which was really kind of a cool thing. But because Katona had the choice and because Kavanaugh has been his head coach for 4 or 5 years, something like that, along with Owen Roddy and a lot of those other coaches on the team, he just decided he was going to coach, or I guess switch over to that team and get coached by his normal coaches, which gives him a real advantage actually on the Ultimate Fighter.
Yeah, and he actually spoke about it on an interview afterwards on how much he learned from the one group of coaches and then moving over to the other guns with the guys, has helped him so much as well. So he can now, I guess, talk about it because the win last night puts him into the final, and that is not pre-taped. He is set for another fight of his life coming up very soon. Fill people in on when this finale will be and what's at stake for Brad Katona when he gets back in the octagon in that championship fight.
Yeah, so reports have indicated that fight's going to be in Boston at UFC 292. Would likely be on the preliminary card, which would mean it would still be televised. That's typically what they do because they want all of the different partners who air The Ultimate Fighter to have basically the final fight on their air. So, yeah, that's the expectation, is that Brad is going to compete in I think it's 3 weeks' time at UFC 291 in Boston, which is a cool spot for him to be competing.
What does a win mean for Brad Katona, considering that he's a very unique story? He's already been there. He's already won it. And then, of course, has had this long, circuitous path back to the octagon and an opportunity to win again.
Well, it's history and it's redemption. It's both of those things, because historically he'll be the first to have won the show twice, which is an honor in and of itself. And his dream has always been to fight in the UFC, and he achieved that dream, and then it was unceremoniously ended, really for, again, I don't think that he was somebody who the UFC should have cut. I think that skill-wise, he's better than, I'd say, everybody, outside of the top 20 in the bantamweight division. It can certainly make a case that he could beat some of these ranked fighters. He's that good. Again, he went over to the Middle East and beat a lot of these great fighters from, Russia, Dagestan, guys that he was supposed to lose to, ends up beating those guys. Like, he's been dealt a bad hand every step of the way, and he's managed to overcome it.
From my perspective, he seems like a really marketable fighter too. I mean, he's a really nice guy. He's smiling. He looks nothing like your stereotypical MMA fighter. Was it something against him because of that? He probably, like, if you look at him regular dressed, you'd think he was more going to engineering class, frankly, than going out to beat the hell out of somebody. But you put him in the octagon, and he is a completely different human being.
Yeah, that's why his nickname's Superman, because he's like a Clark Kent type. He's this kind of goofy guy with glasses that you would never expect. That you see this guy take his shirt off, and he's got this like muscular build, like a superhero. So that's kind of how he got that nickname. And I agree. And also, we don't have a whole lot of Canadian fighters in the UFC right now. So getting rid of one, to me, was also very counterproductive. This was pre-pandemic, where you were still expecting to have cards in Canada and need Canadian talent to fill them. And I thought that Brad was one of the best Canadians in the UFC when he got released. So it was just very surprising to me that had happened at the time.
Does a win get him back in the UFC and back in the mix for a number of fights?
Yeah, he gets a contract, typically a 4-fight contract.
And that obviously, big for someone, especially at his stage of his career. You mentioned Canadians right now. We had that period of GSP being the guy. Where are we at right now with MMA in Canada? We'll be paying attention to Brad, but and maybe if you can talk about where Mike Malott is, because we sort of know his brother Jeff, who plays here in Winnipeg for the Manitoba Moose, and talked a lot to Jeff about watching his brother, and he seems to have had a real good run over the past year or so as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So Canada had a real lull for some time, where it took us a while to have fighters that were getting ranked. For a time, we had one, maybe two ranked fighters, and then we had none. And the UFC came back to Canada in Vancouver back in June, and every Canadian on the card won. They went 7-0, swept the board. And I think that was really a turning point for Canadian MMA. We're starting to see the regional scene come back to life over the past couple of years. We've got these great promotions like a Unified, BTC, BFL, a lot of these great up-and-coming promotions where you're seeing talent that are rising up. And, I'm seeing it at the grassroots level. We're starting to see a lot of up-and-coming talent resurface, because the pandemic had kind of shut it down for 2 years, where people didn't have places to fight. They'd have to go stateside. And oftentimes when a Canadian goes stateside, they're given pretty tough matchups. So not that the matchups aren't always tough, but you know what I mean? They're kind of brought in to lose. So now we're starting to see it come back to life. I think that Mike Malott, as you mentioned, was the last Canadian on that card in Vancouver and had all this pressure on his back. And he told me that he had prepared for every single scenario that could possibly play out, whether every Canadian before him had lost, whether every Canadian before him had won, the pressure he was going to have to deal with. And then to make matters worse, on his walk to the cage, the barricade fell and fans fell onto his team. And he said, well, that was one of the things I didn't mentally prepare for. And he still was able to kind of walk past it in his head. He was like, nope, I'm not going to let that get to me. We got to fight to enter. And he managed to rise to the occasion. And I think right now, of the Canadians in the UFC, he certainly is the highest profile and somebody who has really captured the imagination of this country.
Well, we'll certainly look forward to him getting back into the octagon. But first things first, our guy from the Peg, Brad Katona, trying to be the first ever fighter to win the Ultimate Fighter twice. Do we know who he's fighting yet, or is that on next week's card or next week's show?
I think it's probably in the show in 2 weeks. I think they're going back to lightweights next week, but it's a guy named Rico Desculo who was the one member of McGregor's team to win. And I'm trying to remember who the other. There was another. I think it was Cody Gibson. I think Cody Gibson is the other fighter, the other bantamweight that won. So they're going to be facing each other in 2 weeks' time, if I'm not mistaken.
And that's when they'll show it. But essentially, I mean, these guys are now getting ready. Whoever does win, we don't know it yet. We'll find out on the winner of that will be fighting Brad, reportedly at in Boston, and in a few weeks. And what a big night that'll be for fight fans here, and certainly for Brad. He's such a nice young man and such a great story. Be great to see him back in the UFC. Aaron, always great having you on the program, my friend. Listen, fill people in on everything you've got going on covering MMA over at TSN right now, because there's a lot of it, and people need to know where to find it.
For sure. Well, I've done everybody kind of a favor. I've put everything at one link. It's www.aaron.report. So if you go to that website, it has all of the different links to my work. And I'll also be adding a link to the World MMA Awards voting. If you do have the chance to vote for me, I would really appreciate that.
Listen, we'll get some WST love for our guy Bronsteter. Right. Absolutely. We'll throw that link in the chat as well. And see if we can what does Helwani have? 12 straight right now?
So I've got 12 straight. I'm the only Canadian resident that is nominated.
He left us.
Take that, Helwani.
He's gone. Hey, congratulations again, and thanks for doing this.
And my pleasure, guys. Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure.
All right, good stuff with Aaron Bronsteter. Always love having Braun with us. We are going to get to Coolbet lines and some picks before we finish up the program. But I'm just going to play this clip back to the Jets for a minute with Rasmus Kupari and his signing. We're going to hear what Daryl Evans had to say. But I'd love to throw it out to you folks for our Why Not question of the day for Not Autocorp overly at Waverly and McGillivray. Why Not question of the day is, where do you see Rasmus Kupari fitting into the Jets lineup this year? Do you see him as the fourth center, or is there another area of the operation that you think he might be able to contribute in, potentially higher up in the lineup or connecting with some other players that are on the roster right now? So give us your thoughts in the chat. Rasmus Kupari for the Why Not question of the day for Not Autocorp. All right, maybe before you answer that, you'd like to hear a little bit more about Kupari. We had the chance to catch up with Kings broadcaster and former King, Daryl Evans, and we asked him about Kupari and what sort of a package he's bringing to Winnipeg.
Kupari, again, former first-round pick. He's got size. He's a good skater. Good vision on the ice. He took on a role as a little bit on the penalty kill. They showed a lot of trust in him in that. He improved in the face-off circle. He, too, can play both center and the wing. Shoots the puck well. I still think there's a little bit more offense in his game that we saw in L.A., and maybe because of the situation he was in L.A., where he was playing, maybe a little bit smothered. So now an opportunity to kind of rebirth in his career, and a chance maybe to elevate his role and maybe play on that third line. But it'll be interesting to see where his career goes in the next couple of years.
All right, so there's Daryl Evans. And Remo, listen, 1 million, I think that was sort of what everyone thought that this would come in. But I will admit, I am intrigued of Rasmus Kupari and what a change of scenery and a little more opportunity might mean for the young player.
It was just with the number of years. And you look at who's he replacing on the fourth line center? If he is that, David Gustafsson had 0 goals last year, and Rasmus Kupari had 3. I think someone in chat said that was 3 times more goals. Or sorry, he had 3 goals last year. Someone said that was 3 times more goals. Well, not exactly 3 times 0 was still 0, but it'll be interesting to see. He's a right-hand shot, Rasmus Kupari. So he's going to have an opportunity or maybe kill some penalties. We'll see how it goes.
All right, let's get to the Coolbet lines for tonight. Blue Jays and Orioles going at it this evening. It's Kikuchi time, and it needs to be Kikuchi time because the Jays need to salvage something out of this series after dropping the first 2. Jays minus 119, Orioles plus 106. There has been some value with the O's. so far this week as underdogs in both the first two and winning both. I think my favorite game, and I'm going to throw this in on our Coolbet play of the day on the Coolbet channels, is the Reds at plus 130 over the Cubs. Cubs, I think, sort of got all their runs out last night. These two teams are very close. Cincinnati's been competitive this year. In a roll with Cincinnati at plus 130 on the money line. And maybe a little sprinkle on the Mets, although the Royals have somehow won 4 in a row. And they won last night on a walk-off balk. So maybe it's a good time just to fade the Mets and keep on riding the Royals. CFL lines, the Bombers are still 6-point favorites. I have to admit, I am shocked that this number is this high. I think BC probably deserves to be, maybe a 3-point underdog, maybe 3.5. I'm stunned that it is as big as it is. But again, very short week for BC, very hungry Winnipeg team with some key players back. Would love to see the Bombers cover handily. But that is 6 points right now over at Coolbet. Bombers minus 238 on the money line. Other games are Argos in Calgary, Toronto 8.5-point favorites. Montreal at Hamilton, the Alouettes a road favorite of minus 2.5. And the Ottawa Redblacks, a 1-point road favorite in Saskatchewan to take on the Riders on Sunday night. And don't forget, I mentioned this at the start, but if you click on the exclusives tab and go to the bottom, the Winnipeg Sports Talk Parlay is there. Bombers to win on Thursday, Sea Bears to win on Friday, plus 185 right now. Oh, and I see the Lock Shop Partner Parlay is also up. We like JT Poston, Denny McCarthy, and Hideki Matsuyama all to finish in the top 20. That one's up there at plus 1150, and I'm going to throw a 20 on that just as we are doing it. And that'll pay $250 if those guys come in. Check out today's Lock Shop for a little bit more on the Wyndham Championship. All right, before we go, Wednesday, live racing. I'm going to be there tonight. Talked a lot about the incredible food there, taking my folks. Really looking forward to it. But Remis, I don't think I could have picked a better day to go with the fam to the track than today. Well, maybe yesterday, because how good the picks were. But I have definitely heated up, and I think I have closed the gap from the beginning of the season.
Yeah, we just added up. We're very close. We're neck and neck here. So I had a big lead to start the year. You were putting up zeros. I was making some picks, but lately I just haven't had any big wins. It's just been kind of breaking even. And yeah, you had some big hits yesterday. I had one winner, race 5 or 7. Smart call. As I said, it was a smart call, taking that one to win.
Yeah, well, I got this text from a friend last night, and then it kept going. My pal Ross, a Marble regular, fired me a message. Huss, thanks for the ASD tip. Put money on race number 3. Did the exactor 3, 6, and 3 to win. I said, hell yeah, I'm heating up, Roscoe. Then about 20 minutes later, he said, you're the golden boy tonight. Race 4, you said 7 and 1. You were bang on. Thanks, amigo. And then about another 25 minutes later, holy bleep, Andrew, race 5, number 5 to win. Bang, it happened. And funny enough, I was getting these messages, and I went back and figured, what the heck? I'll throw $3 on race number 6 on an underdog horse, and it came through and won another 31. So yes, very hot right now. And I'm going to actually, because I'm going to be there, I'm not sure whether I'll be there all night. I'm going to focus in on the later races for my selections right now, and then I'll probably live bet the other ones when I get there. But I do have race 3, 4, 5, and 7, I guess, for this evening's action, Remo.
Okay, I have 1, 2, 4, 5, and 7 on my card.
Okay, we're going to start it off with 3 then. I've got a 5-6 exacta box. Daddy's Rare Edition, and shout out to Rick the Model Martel, Arrogance. So 5-6 for race number 3. Sorry, you have 1 or 2?
Yeah, I said I got 1 and 2.
Okay, you fire away on those ones.
Okay, race 1. Horse 2, Damn the Torpedoes. Great album by Tom Petty. I'm taking this one. Nice program selection there. Race 2. See, you got race 2, a triactor box. Going with 1, 2, 4, Distinct Approval, Artesian Dancer, and Leah's on Tune. I think Leah's on Tune was a winner for us last year. We went out to the down, so I like this race.
Well, one of the horses that I bet last night, the one at 6, I don't think had ever raced before, and it got in. Don't sleep on number 6, LL Cool Gray, who is 10-1 on the opening point, but has not yet raced at Assiniboia Downs. So maybe I'll add that to the card right now. LL Cool Gray for race number 2.
And you got race 3, right?
Yeah, I just dropped race
Arrogance?
3 to you. Yeah, Arrogance and Daddy's Rare Edition 5-6 Exacta box.
I was pretty close to Never Had I Ever, but I didn't. That was a fun game growing up as a kid, and if you like the show also, the Mindy Kaling one, Never Have I Ever, it's funny. I think it's on Netflix. Anyways, race 4, I'm on number 2 to win. The Comrie rule. It's 20-1. Mike Comrie, who I have used on Puck Doku before. He played for Edmonton and some other teams. I know I've used him. He won for me a couple weeks ago, but that was a 5.5 furlongs race. This is
5.5 furlongs.
This is this is also 5.5 furlongs, because you've told me.
That's why I'm also on the Comrie rule. The minute I saw the last time he went at 5.5, he won.
Yes.
And the other 5.5 was 2. He's got speed. Maybe he doesn't have the endurance or the distance.
Whoa.
I'm with you on the Comrie rule. That might be the consensus play of the day in race number 4 for tonight.
That's crazy. I only bet $2, but this is 20-1. I got scared off by that number, but it won for me a couple weeks ago, so I'm in on the Comrie rule.
I got a 3 on the Comrie rule tonight.
Okay.
Race 5. This is where I put most of my stuff in. Race 5, I've got a triactor box. 1, 3, 4. Dazzlin' Mischief, Tis Funny are the favorites, and I'm adding in Feller, who opened at 15-1.
So you're not taking horse 6, Mandrew?
No, I'm not taking Mandrew.
You're obligated. You should be taking Mandrew.
Maybe when I'm at the track, I'll throw a $2 on it. But now that I'm right back in it, I'm going to really try and, actually win these. Just keep the momentum going. And I didn't feel Mandrew tonight.
Okay, well, I think tonight's going to be my lucky break. I got $2 on lucky break. Horse 2. Look, Smart Call won yesterday. Lucky break today. I don't know. I'm feeling it.
Race 6, I've got a $1 triactor box. We're going with 2, Night Flyer, 4, Reasonably Lovely, and 6, Sparkling Silver.
Yeah, I don't have anything on this race.
Is that right? Was that Sparkling Silver?
It
is Sparkling Silver. I don't know. That may have been a mistake. I don't necessarily.
What about Diamond Grand? I thought about Diamond Grand here.
Diamond Grand. This is a wild one. Yeah, that's 6-1 with Antonio Whitehall, who we do like quite a bit. Dubdy Saint Angel. No. And then one final race is race 7. I'm gonna bet this one on the card because I don't think I'll be there for that. 5-8 Exacta box.
Mm-hmm.
Know What I Meana and What Up Now JT.
Yeah, I also have Know What I Meana to win. So I'm a Know What I Meana.
There you go. Hey, and tomorrow actually is the big day. The big Derby press conference, because the Derby is on Monday night of the long weekend. We won't be doing a show on Monday with it being the long weekend, but remember, that is the biggest day of the year at the track. So if you're thinking about a great way to finish up the long weekend, get out there, and may have to see if one Darren Dunn can jump on the show tomorrow or Friday to tee it all up for us. I'll do a little bit of intel when I'm out at the track tonight, Reem.
Yeah, we should definitely do that. Have him on. I know they got the big press conference kickoff, and you and I will have our picks. Did we pick the winner last year? I thought we did.
We did.
So I'm looking forward to that. Has one other thing, looking forward to. I don't know if you saw this yesterday. NFL announced. Remember the Nickelodeon broadcast during the wild card game?
Of course, the slime.
Yes, how awesome it was. Well, they announced yesterday, because CBS is doing the Super Bowl, there will also be an alternate Nickelodeon broadcast for the Super Bowl. Will you be watching the Nickelodeon broadcast or the CBS broadcast? Because for me, I don't think I can ever watch a regular broadcast again if there's a Nickelodeon alternative.
I probably am not as fired up. I don't have a 4-year-old that might be more, although you seem to be more into this than
I don't care about him. I care about me. What do you mean? I'm not.
What about the slime for the touchdown?
He doesn't watch football. Man, he goes to bed at 7.
I might click over to it. So CBS, who is that? Who will that booth be? Nance?
Is it Jim Nance and Tony Romo? I'm pretty sure. Aren't they still the number one? Although Tony Romo, he's way down on the NFL announcer power rankings now.
Big time. He's been too much time golfing and not enough time prepping.
That's the consensus on Twitter. But how cool is this, Huss? Look, they got the slime in the end zone. They got the slime monster when you're in the red zone. SpongeBob in between the uprights. I'm not watching the regular Super Bowl broadcast anymore. I'm watching the Nickelodeon one. They got the kid-friendly commentary, which who needs the comment? Who listens to the commentary?
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
When the Chiefs score touchdowns in that Super Bowl, will the slime be red?
No.
That's the case. I might be in for it.
No, I think it's green, and then I think they give a trophy to the winner. Will there be an MVP trophy in the Nickelodeon slime MVP?
It's the MVP.
Oh, the MVP. Yeah. So
yeah,
there you go.
Who can forget Mitch Trubisky winning the MVP a couple years ago? Probably the highlight of his NFL career.
So this is great news, and I'm a fan of alternate broadcasts, and I hope that it was the highest rated wild card game ever. The one they did this past year when it was on Nickelodeon. So they're doing it for the Super Bowl too. Love it. Alternate broadcasts for the win.
There you go, folks. Well, we'll have more information on that. I cannot wait for NFL season. Lee'll join Remis on Friday when I'm away for a little bit more of the training camp scuttlebutt from around the NFL. But very busy show today. Great to have you all with us. Thanks so much. Hit that thumbs up if you haven't already, and do us a favor. Tell a friend about Winnipeg Sports Talk. Let's get our subs going again and continuing our drive to 10,000. Tomorrow on the program, Darren Bombing, Dustin Nielsen. We will also have a visit, I believe, from our pal Brandon Rowicki. And it's going to be a lot about tomorrow's big game. And we'll try and hook up maybe with the CEBL as well before Friday's record-breaking game again for the Winnipeg Sea Bears. And don't forget, the Upper Deck's open. Tickets are available. If you haven't been already, check it out on Friday night. Let's cash that Winnipeg Sports Talk exclusive at Coolbet. Bombers to win and Sea Bears to win. Be a hell of a way to go into the long weekend. Big thanks to the sponsors that make this show happen every day. Of course, Aaron Bronsteter, Scotty Billeck, Farhan, Lalji, and Derek Taylor. Great job by Michael Remis. If you see me at the track tonight, say hi. If not, I'll say hi to you tomorrow, 1 p.m. right here live on YouTube and following afterward on the podcast on Winnipeg Sports Talk. Have a great one, everyone.
Oh, my God. Oh! Shut it down. Let's go home.
Thanks for tuning in to